Hello everyone. I believe we are on at this point, and welcome to our INES presentation today of a CCNA Kickoff. This is something that I do on a monthly basis, and if you read the description of the session today, it's really geared towards people who are strongly considering taking the CCNA, but they don't know what they're getting themselves into. They don't know what the test looks like. They don't know how to study for the test. They want to know some common pitfalls they can avoid, some ways that they can make their studying experience better and more efficient. And that's what I'm here to hopefully help you with today. So like I said, we do this every single month. We generally record them as well. So if you are an INE member, you can see the previous recordings we have of this. And if for some reason you have to step away today, it is being recorded, so you will see it on INE's website as well. So let me just start out in case you've never seen me before. My name is Keith Bogart, and I am the instructor here for today's session. I've also recorded a ton of CCNA routing and switching videos, as well as a lot of the CCNP routing and switching videos as well. And as you probably saw in sort of the previews to this class as it was coming up, that I also host a live CCNA boot camp and some CCNP boot camps as well. Some people were asking just before the class started where those are held. Currently, 99% of our CCNA and CCNP boot camps are held right here in North Carolina. I'm currently in the Raleigh, North Carolina area as I'm talking to you, and our boot camps are held just right downstairs, downstairs of the INE office here. And every once in a while, we also have some boot camps in the San Jose, California area as well. So if that appeals to you, you can just look on our calendar for that. So let me just show you really quickly, if you are interested in pursuing a CCNA or CCNP bootcamp, I would love to see you. I am currently the instructor of those, and I'd love to have you out there. There's, generally speaking, always seats available. So you might be wondering, well, when is the next one and where are they? So let me just show you how to find that. So what you'll need to do is go to the, there's two ways you can do it. I would suggest that you go to the INE members account. So just go to members.ine.com. Now, if you don't have an INE membership account, no problem. It's free. You don't have to pay anything for it. If you try going here and you don't have one, it'll ask you to register. I think all you have to do is provide your name and your email address, and that's basically it. No credit card number or anything like that needed. And then you'll get an INE account. And so this is what the main page looks like right here. So if you are interested in any of our live boot camps, whether it be CCNA, CCNP, or some level of CCIE, this is one good way to find out. You can just see the schedule right here, the monthly calendar. And all these things here in this dark blue color, these are our live instructor-led boot camps. So I believe the next one that I'm going to be teaching is going to be the week of November 13th. You can see it right here in RTP, North Carolina, the CCNA Routing and Switching Boot Camp. So I'd love to see you. If that's something that interests you, I'd love to have you there. But you can just scroll through here. Some other ways that you can get information about the boot camps is if you go to INE's main website, ine.com. And you can see here up at the top, it says boot camps. You can just click on that. And since right now we're talking about CCNA, I'll just go here to CCNA boot camps. And I'm going to talk about this Customer Appreciation Month in just a second. That's a pretty cool thing that we're doing. But you can see here, our CCNA boot camp, you can see the price. And frequently we have sales and specials on that as well, but that is our list price. And if you click on that, it gives you a little description of it. And then you can see here the dates and locations of the ones coming up. Okay, so like I said, if that's something that appeals to you, I would encourage you to show up to a CCNA boot camp or a CCNP boot camp. Also, just one additional thing about the boot camps. The boot camps are really designed to get the most effective time out of a boot camp. It's really best if you spend some significant time studying first. You don't want the boot camp to be the very first thing you do, whether it be CCNA or all the way up to CCIE. You want to spend several months studying the technology, doing some labs, and I'm going to talk all about, how do you do that in just a second here. But you want the boot camp really to be sort of like the final thing that you do before you sit down and you take your exam. So that's what the boot camp is geared for. And that's where you'll get the maximum effectiveness out of it if you spend, a good 5+ months before the boot camp, doing your studying and practice and stuff, and then show up as the boot camp approaches. So that being said, that's all I'm going to say about boot camps right now. We might go back to that later. But let's go to our course objective. So, like I mentioned, what is the objectives for today's course? Well, number one, I want to describe the testing experience for you for the CCNA so that when you walk into a testing center, you're not completely taken by surprise at the experience. You have sort of a visual in your head as to what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what they're going to ask you to do, what you're allowed to bring in with you and what you're not allowed to bring in with you, and all those things as well. So we'll talk about that. I absolutely am going to identify some common pitfalls. You know, there's a lot of reasons why when people start studying for their CCNA, a lot of them never finish. They never get to the point of actually taking the test, and they just sort of fall off by the wayside after spending a few weeks or a few months on it. And so I'll talk about what are some of the reasons why that happens and how can you prevent that from happening to you. And also I'm going to give you some tips to help you with the studying process. Tips like, you know, how do I know what topics I need to study? And once I identify a topic, how do I know what level of depth I need to study? And once I identify a topic, where should I find study materials for that? Videos, reading material, books, papers, where do I find that kind of stuff? What are some ways that can make my studying time more effective? Maybe ways I can work with other people, work with equipment, and we'll talk about all that good stuff today. So I've broken this course today into about 5 or 6 sort of segments. The first one here is going to be called the testing experience. And then because we have a significant amount of people right now logged into YouTube Live and watching this, I can't really flip back and forth between every slide and looking at your questions. So what I'm going to do is at the end of every single segment, which will be, you know, roughly, I don't know, 15 minutes per segment, something like that. I'll take a break from the slides and I'll look at your questions. And I'll see if there's any unanswered questions, and then we'll go back to the next segment. The last time we did this, last month in September, there were a lot of people logged into YouTube Live who are actually doing a great job at answering other people's questions, and I love to see that. So if you're watching this on YouTube Live and you see someone post a question, you know the answer to it, you know, you have experience with that, please share your wisdom, share your experience so that other people can benefit from it as well. And then, like I said, during the Q&A, I'll scroll through and I'll see if I can identify anything that people did not answer. So that also being the case, let me go back here real quickly about one thing I missed. It was on the slide, but I didn't talk about it verbally, which is my contact information right there. So feel free at any point in time to reach out to me. I love hearing from you guys. You can get you see my email address right there. You can also reach out to me via Twitter. And there's also my LinkedIn contact information if you want to reach out to me that way. So I love hearing from you guys, and I'm always available. Now, if I happen to be teaching a class, clearly it might take me a few days to get back to you, but usually I try to be pretty fast about responding to people's queries. Now, if you have a question about the CCNA, maybe it's a technical question like, you know, I don't understand this thing in spanning tree and how this works, or you know, should I expect to see a question on this complex topic right here or anything like that? Before you reach out to me, and I'm always available, ideally, I would like you to reach out to INE's online community and post your question there. And so let me show you, what is the INE online community? Well, let me show you how to get to that, and then I'll talk about, why that's such a great thing. So once you log into your members account, and you're here, up in the upper right-hand corner, and you can see this here where it says Connect. The first link is IEOC. That's for the INE Online Community. So you can go ahead and click on that, and that will take you to our online forums. And you can see here we have a lot of forums. We have jobs, we got general discussion. For the purposes of this presentation, you're probably going to be interested in the Cisco CCNA forum. So you'll want to, let's see here, am I already logged in? Yes, it's already got me logged in. So you just want to click on Cisco CCNA, and you can see here the vast majority of discussions and comments are actually in the second one here that's called CCNA. So you'll click on that. And then from here, First, I would just scroll through. Now, there's a lot of stuff here. You can also do a search. But, if you have a question, for example, about spanning tree root bridge, what is that? Well, try searching for it first. There's a very good chance that somebody else has already posed a question on that topic. And so you might be able to get your answer right then and there. Now, if you're like me, you don't like searching for any more than about 3 or 4 minutes, and then you're all like, it's taking too much time. I'd rather just post my own question. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. So here you just click on New Discussion, and you type in your question, what is a spanning tree root bridge? So when you type in your question in the title, just like I did, type in something that's meaningful, something that's specific. Sometimes there's people who put in questions and the title of the question is like, question, or please help me, or I don't understand. And I'll tell you what, no one's going to answer that, right? People are way too busy with their own stuff. They're not going to click on that to see, I wonder what his question is, or I wonder what she doesn't understand. So make the title of your question very specific so that people will know right away, oh, he's asking about something I have no knowledge of. I'm not going to waste my time with that. Or, oh yeah, I think I know exactly what this person's asking. And then, of course, put your question, what we call the question stem, which is the body of the question, inside the box here, and then click on Post Discussion. And typically speaking, in less than 24 hours, you'll get at least one answer, probably several, from people. There's thousands of people that look at this thing. And the reason why I like this is because your question and the answer you get back is not only helping you, it's also helping lots of other people as well, right? So if you just email me directly, it doesn't help anybody else. Nobody else is benefiting. Now, if you put a question in here and the unthinkable happens and a couple days goes by and nobody answers back, which is almost never, then by all means, reach out to me via email, reach out to me via Twitter or LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to help you out. But I would ideally prefer that you post your questions of any nature for CCNA in here first so that other people can benefit from it. All right, so that is our IEOC. So let's go into our first topic, which is the testing experience. And then after this section here, I'll take a break and go through the Q&A and see if there's any unanswered questions from you guys. All right, so one thing you might not be aware of if you're just starting out on this journey for the CCNA is that in order to get that precious piece of paper that says you're CCNA certified and immediately starting to make, $750,000 a year, well, you got a couple choices. And those choices are, how many exams do you want to take? Because to get your CCNA, you could take 1 test or 2 tests. So let me explain a little bit about that. So if you want to take 2 separate exams, those exams are called the ICND-1 and the ICND-2. And you typically would take them in that order. You would take the ICND-1 first, followed by the ICND-2. And then once you've passed both of those, you got your CCNA. And they will mail you, a nice certificate in the mail, and you can go out and make your millions as a network administrator. Or your other option is to take what's called the composite exam, which is one exam that pulls questions from both the ICND-1 and the ICND-2. Now, first of all, where do you find these exams? Then I'll talk a little bit about what's different and which one should you go for. So I'm going to go back to our good friend Google here. And from Google, let's just type in Cisco CCNA. And the second link down. So here are the actual exam numbers, and this is what you would need to know when you register for an exam. ICND-1 is the 100-105, ICND-2 is the 200-105, or if you're bold and you want to just get it done in one shot, you can take the 200-125, which is technically called the CCNA Accelerated exam. All right, so what's really the difference between them and why would you take one over the other? So let's talk a little bit about that. This is what I typically recommend to people when they ask me that question. My question back to you would be, how much existing network experience do you already have? Okay, so if you already work in some capacity with networking, the terms of an IP address, the terms of LAN, the term of routing are not completely foreign to you. You know what those things mean. You have a little bit of experience with it. You know, if you've been working with networking for, I'd say, at least 6 months minimum, then you can probably confidently take the CCNA Accelerated exam, the one exam that's what I call the composite exam. But if that does not describe you, okay, if you really haven't touched the world of networking at all, maybe you're making a career move, right? Right now you work in payroll and you want to go into being a network admin. You know, right now you work as a janitor at the elementary school and you want to be the network admin for that elementary school or whatever it is. The fact is you have little to no networking experience. You do not want to take the composite exam. Way too much stuff for you to try to memorize all at once to pass one exam. In that particular case, you'll definitely want to start with the ICND-1 first, followed by the ICND-2. Now, another common question I get, how long should I take to prepare? How long should I study? That is such a subjective question. I mean, there's people out there who have photographic memories, right? Who can read a page and bam, they got it. It's in their head. Someone like that, yeah, they could probably knock out the ICND-1 in about a month and a half or 2 months. But I'm guessing that probably does not describe you. Certainly doesn't describe me. And in all these exams, there's a lot of stuff you got to memorize, a lot of terms, a lot of timers, a lot of numbers, certainly a lot of Cisco iOS software commands to get the routers and switches to do what you want them to do. So for each one of these, for the ICND-1 and the ICND-2, I would say if you could afford to dedicate a minimum of, let's say during the week, you're dedicating a minimum of an hour and a half a day during the weekday to study. And really, I'd like to see you dedicating at least 2 to 3 hours a day. But let's just say you can't do that, right? You got kids at home, you have a spouse who says, hey, help me out here. You know, whatever the reason is, an hour and a half is about all you can cram in Monday through Friday. And on the weekends, maybe you're fortunate where you can put in maybe 3 or 4 hours on Saturday and on Sunday. Okay, so if that describes you, then I would expect that you're going to want to take a minimum, an absolute minimum of probably 3.5 to 4 months to knock out the ICND-1 and another 3.5 to 4 months to knock out the ICND-2. And that's if you're pretty good at memorization, all right? With some flashcards and stuff like that, you pick things up pretty quickly, you memorize things pretty quickly. 3.5 to 4 months per exam, I would say is reasonable. A lot of people take 6+ months, 6 months or more per exam. So that gives you a rough time frame there. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone who went from 0 to hero, right? Somebody who knew nothing about networking and got their ICND-1. I think the shortest amount of time I've ever heard was like a month and a half. And that's for like people who are unemployed, living at home with mom and dad, had no responsibilities, and they could dedicate themselves to studying 8 hours a day, every day, and sleep with a book under their head, right? So if that describes you, you're very fortunate, count yourself blessed, and you can probably get this in about a month and a half. But most of us, that doesn't describe us. Okay, so you've decided, okay, I'm going to take the 2 exam approach, or I'm going to take the 1 exam approach. So how do you register for this thing? All right, so while you're still on this page right here, just click on the exam that you want. For example, I'll click on the ICND-1. And from the ICND-1 right here, you'll see up at the top, register at Pearson VUE. So let me talk a little bit about what is Pearson VUE. So these exams are what Cisco calls proctored exams. What does that mean? So an unproctored exam would be an example of like an exam you could take on your own laptop in the comfort of your own home, right? Like a survey or something you're taking where no one's looking over your shoulder. You're free to cheat if you want to. That is not what these are. So a proctored exam in this terminology is where you actually have to go somewhere. You have to go to a testing center, and Pearson VUE is the authorized company that Cisco has selected as their testing center. Now there's thousands of Pearson VUE locations all over the world. So your first step would be to identify a Pearson VUE location that's close to you. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Then you schedule the test, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Find a time and a date at that location that's suitable for you. You pay for it in advance, and I'll show you that in just a second. And then you go there. And then when you go there, well, I'll talk about the testing experience in just a minute, but you're going to go there and you're going to sit down in front of one of their computers and you're going to take your exam. And then once you're done, it's going to be a timed exam. You've only got a certain time window to complete it in. And once you're done, you know right there if you've completed it, if you passed it, or if you failed it. And I'll talk about all those details, but that's what we mean by a proctored exam. It's a place you go to take the exam. They have video cameras on the ceiling pointing down so they can tell if you're taking some notes out from underneath your tongue and trying to cheat or something like that. So that's what they mean by proctored. They're doing their best attempt to make sure you don't cheat and you actually know this stuff when you go in there and you take the exam. So how do I find a location? How do I schedule it? So let's do that. So here on the Register at Pearson VUE, you click right there. Now, if you haven't already registered, once again, it's free to register on Pearson VUE. You would just click on Create an Account. But I've already got one, so I'm just going to click on Sign In. All right, so the first thing is, like I said, it's a proctored exam. So you're going to click on the link here that says Proctored Exams. And, I've already got this tab up here, so 100-105. That's what I'm going to look for. So 100-105. And you can see you've got some choices here. So this very first one is the exam itself. Let me zoom in on that a little bit. These other ones here are a little bit more expensive. And what these ones do is, in addition to scheduling and paying for the exam, you also get either 30-day or 60-hour access to like some practice labs and practice tests and things like that. So that's above and beyond that, costs even more. So right now, all I want to do is schedule the exam. I'm going to use my trusted friend and advisor, I&E, for all of my labs and videos and other stuff. So click on that, click on Go. Get to select one of 3 languages here, whichever you understand. So I'm going to do English. So I'm sorry if you're Martian, you're just out of luck here. So you can see here, here's the price. And so this raises another question. Sometimes people ask me, they say, is there a financial benefit to taking the 2 separate exams or taking the composite exam? And the answer is no, there's not. You can see here that the individual exams, like the ICND-1, is $165. So the ICND-1 and the ICND-2, they're both $165. Well, guess what? The CCNA composite exam is you save like $5 over taking the CCNA composite exam. It's $5 less than if you took these 2 exams together. So are you saving money by taking the composite exam? Yeah, you're saving $5. That's about it. Not really huge savings. Okay, so we see the price right here. And this can change without notice, of course. So I'm going to click on Schedule this exam. And I'm clicking Yes. I promise not to cheat. I promise not to let other people know what the exam questions are. I will be confidential. Next. All right. And so here's where you type in, for example, your address, either your home address, your work address, and then it'll pull up a bunch of testing centers that are fairly close to you. It'll give you a map. So let's just say in this particular case, I'm going to choose the first one here. North Carolina Elite Career Services. I'm going to click Next. And now I should get a schedule. And I can see, when can I go in there? So I can go in there as early as tomorrow, the 13th. So I'm going to click on that. And here are the time slots that are available tomorrow to take the exam. Now you might be wondering, okay, so I select a time. I'll go ahead and do that. 10:30 in the morning. Let's do that. And now I should get the point where they want my credit card. Right. Okay, so right here, $165, and they're saying, hey, you sure you don't want to spend some more money on some practice exams and stuff? You go, no, I trust I&E. I'm going to use their stuff, not yours. So I'm just going to schedule the exam, proceed to checkout. Hopefully this thing does not, you know what? I'm going to stop right here because I don't know if this thing has my credit card cached or not, but you get the idea. After this point, you're going to type in your credit card, you're going to pay, and you're off and running. So your next question might be, okay, how long is the exam? What should I expect right there? Let's go back to this. So here we have the ICND-1. ICND-2 is exactly the same thing. Notice you get 90 minutes. So you're going to have anywhere from 45 to 55 questions, and you're going to have 90 minutes to complete that. And the ICND2 is exactly the same thing. Once that time is done, it's done. There's no extension to that. You say, well, what if I choose to take the composite exam? You know, I've already been working in networking for a while. I want to take my luck at that. Well, you get a little bit more time with that one, and you get a little bit more questions. Instead of 40 to 55 questions, actually, no, I'm sorry, you get the same amount of time, but more questions. So you also get 90 minutes, but there's a little bit more questions, 60 to 70 questions instead of 45 to 55. So all these exams, 90 minutes. So that's how much time you're going to have. All right, so let me go back here. So that pretty much, I think, is all I'm going to say about, you know, the one exam versus the two separate exams. Let's also talk now a little bit more about the testing experience. So, what should you expect when you walk into the testing center? All right, you should expect to be verbally, physically, and mentally abused. Now, that hopefully will not happen to you. When you walk into the testing center, first thing is they're going to sign you in. You're going to have to present two forms of identification, a passport, driver's license, you know, your blood bank card, whatever you've got that's got your picture and your name on it, because they don't want to make sure that Joe Smith is going in pretending to be Kathy Brown and take the test, right? So, and then something else with your name on it. Like for me, it's just like a credit card or something like that. So two forms of ID. Then you're going to sign in, and then they're going to take pretty much everything off of your body except for your clothing. So even a stupid little analog watch like this, I had to take this thing off. I'm not sure how I could possibly cheat with this, but you got to give them your watch, you got to give them your calculator, you got to give them your cell phone, your wallet, your heart implant, you know, whatever you've got that could possibly be used for cheating, they're going to take off of you. And depending on the testing center you're at, some testing centers I've gone to, they actually have a row of lockers on the wall. And you'll select a locker, you'll put your stuff in there, and then you take the key with you. Other testing centers, which I don't like this approach, but other testing centers, they actually took my stuff and they put it just in a little pull-out filing drawer in their desk. They had other people's stuff in there too, and then they locked it and they kept the key. Either way, no calculators, no smartphones, no nothing, but your clothes and your brain are going to be allowed into the testing center. All right. Some people are mistakenly assume, oh, well, I don't really have to learn, you know, binary because I can use a calculator. No, you can't. And when you sit down at the PC that they give you, there's no calculator on there, so I can't stress that enough. No calculators. You got to learn how to do hexadecimal and binary and stuff like that in your head, which isn't that hard. Don't be intimidated by it, but I just want to make you aware. No calculators. Then, after they've taken your valuables, they will give you some test accessories. They'll give you a pair of earplugs, which is good because if you're like me and I go into a testing center, I get very distracted when I hear other people weeping and crying because they're having a hard time. I like to put those earplugs in. They will also give you like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of laminated paper, and they will give you a dry erase marker or two and an eraser. So you don't get paper and pen, you get this dry erase marker and this laminated thing, and you go in there and if you need to take notes, well, not really take notes, but if you need to do like a brain dump. A lot of people, before they sit down, they start the exam, they'll write down on stuff like, okay, the OSI model, or they'll write down like a subnetting cheat sheet, or they'll write down like some common TCP, UDP port numbers, things that they've struggled to memorize, that they just want to get there, and so they can create like a study guide for themselves before they actually hit start. So the testing administrator is going to sit you down in front of a computer, they're going to log you in, they're going to walk away. So at this point, you have an option to watch sort of like a demonstration of what the test is like. You'll say, do you want to see it an example or a demonstration? If you click yes, it'll show you each of the question types. I'm going to show you that in just a little bit. We're going to go into that in the next section. And then once that's done, you start the test. So the 90 minutes does not start until you start it. You're in charge of that. Now, clearly, they would probably get a little bit annoyed with you if you sit in there for like 20 minutes before you press the start button. But, you know, if you take 5 or 6 or 7 minutes to use that laminated sheet of paper and to do like a brain dump on that before you start the test, I've never heard of anybody having any issues with that. And many people, including myself, recommend that as an approach before you start your 90 minutes. Okay, And then the 90 minutes will start counting down, and that's when you'll feel your blood pressure skyrocket and go through the roof, because now you know that timer is going. Now, as you go through each question, there's no way to go backwards. In other words, let's say I get to question number 3. I'm all like, oh man, I know I studied this, I remember studying this, but I just don't know which of these is the right answer. You got to guess something. You can't proceed to the next question without selecting something as an answer. And the questions will tell you, select 1, select 2, select 3. So you don't have to guess, do they want 1 answer? Do they want 3 answers? It'll tell you how many answers you have to select. But let's say question number 3, I don't know. I'm just guessing. So B, and I go forward. Now I get to question number 8, and something about the diagram, something about the way question number 8 has been structured, kickstarts my memory, and I realize, oh, I remember what the correct answer was in question number 3. Too late. You can't go backwards. 3 is forever gone, so you can only go forwards as you continue throughout the question, so be aware of that. And unfortunately, it is a very real experience that you will probably experience one or more of the questions being poorly and badly written. I'm not sure who Cisco uses. I'm sure they use more than one person to write these questions, but every single time I've taken a Cisco certification exam, no matter what it was, I always walk out there thinking like, didn't somebody edit this thing? Because some of those questions were horrible. Now, what do I mean by horrible? Sometimes you'll get a question where you'll be thinking like, it says select 1, but of the answers here, A and C could technically be correct based on what they've done here. That's an example of a poor question, right? Or the way the question is written, you'll be thinking, well, technically none of these answers really are what they're looking for. Another poor question. Now, at the top of the screen, there is a button you can press to post a comment. It's up to you whether or not you want to do that. Remember, you're timed, right? So every second is valuable. Probably I would not advise you to waste your time typing a comment. This question stunk. You know, you're wasting valuable time for that. Just move on. And do we even have a guarantee that anybody even really reads those comments? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. So I wouldn't waste your time posting the comments on the questions. So now the next thing you might be wondering is, what do those questions look like? You know, what am I going to be presented with? And for that, I'm going to take us back to Cisco's website right here. So let's look at the, so right now we're on the composite exam. And on all 3 of these, you'll see here, it says review the type of exam questions. Let's move this out of the way here. Review type of exam questions. So go ahead and click on that. And if nothing comes up, which it probably won't like mine, it actually tells you up here, change your settings from loop to play. So I'm just going to click, I'm going to right click in this window, and I'm going to select play. And now these are the types of questions you'll see. So the vast majority of questions that you will get are going to be multiple choice questions. So this is an example of a multiple choice single answer. It'll actually say select 1, so you'll know it's single answer. They also have multiple choice multiple answer, in which case it'll say select 2, select 3. So you have to select whichever ones you want there. So that makes up probably 80–85% of what you'll see on the CCNA. What else might you see? You might get 1 or 2 of these. These are drag and drop questions. So they, for example, OSI model, they love giving you drag and drop questions based on that to see if you know the layers, the names of the layers, the correct order of the OSI layers. But you won't see very many of those. You might not even get any of those. Those are fairly rare. I don't think I've ever gotten one of these, a fill-in-the-blank question, but apparently it's a possibility. I don't think I've ever seen one. These are incredibly rare, but you may see one. Now, this is what's called the dreaded router simulation. And I say dreaded because these things can easily take up 4, 5, 6 minutes out of those precious 90 minutes that you're given. So the way these work is, you know, up at the top, it'll give you some situation like, hey, this is broken. Identify the problem and fix it. And then you'll see a topology diagram, and you'll click on one of the devices in the topology diagram, and it's like you're actually getting into a router, and you have to configure something. So the router simulations, like it says here, you're not actually getting into a real Cisco router. It's a simulation of a router. So what practically does that mean? That means that you're not going to see all of your iOS options available to you. For example, in Cisco iOS, the software, when you type in a question mark and you hit enter, you see all the possible commands that you could type in at the level where you currently are. You're not going to see that here. If you use the question mark, you might see 4 or 5 or 6 options, but you're not going to see the full 20 or 30. Just enough to sort of distract you to see if you know the correct answer or not. There's also a lot of shortcuts in iOS that are also available here. For example, in Cisco iOS, there might be a long command that's like running-config. Well, I could type in running-config, but in Cisco iOS, I could type in RUN, hit my tab key on my keyboard, and it fills in the rest for me. Most of these simulations have that available as well. But the main intent of the simulation is to see one of two things. Either can you configure something from scratch to make something work? For example, they might show 3 routers and they might say, you need to complete the configuration of OSPF between these 3 routers. And so step number 1 is you'd have to click on the routers and figure out, okay, this one's already done, this one's already done, but this one here in the middle, this has no OSPF configuration at all. So then you'd have to configure OSPF on that router. Now, because this is not real Cisco iOS, one of the things you will not have available to you is debugging commands. One of the most useful ways of monitoring and verifying if you've done something right on a real router or real switch is to debug it. Type in debug OSPF, debug spanning tree, whatever. That's not available here. So if you want to see if what you've configured is working, you'll have to know what the appropriate show command is. A lot of monitoring commands start out with the word show, like show IP OSPF, show spanning tree. Not all of the show commands will be available. So I would definitely recommend when you walk in to take this test, you know at least 2 or 3 show commands that can meet any objective. In other words, if I said to you, what is the show command to view the IP address on a router's interface? You should be able to tell me a minimum of 2 commands that begin with the word show that will accomplish that. Because if you just walk into that exam knowing only 1 show command, that might not be the show command that's in the simulation. So you'll want to know many possible ways to meet your objective here. Another thing they might ask you to do on the router simulation is to fix something that's broken, right? Once again, 3 routers running OSPF is not working properly. You have to identify which router is missing a command and type in the command to get it working. So, like I said, router simulations, they will eat up the most amount of your time, but fortunately, you won't get a lot of these. So of your 40 to 55 questions or your 60 to 70 questions, I've gone into some certifications where I only saw 1 simulation, and I count myself lucky. I think the most I've ever encountered was like 4. That was rough. But somewhere between 1 and 4 simulations is what you should experience when you take the exam here. Now, that's not the only type of question you might see. They also have testlets. I hate these questions. So these questions here, notice here that they'll describe something up at the top, and then you have a multiple choice question to figure out, but you're not done. Look at this over here on the right. This is actually like 4 questions in 1. So even though it only counts as like 1 question, question number 9 out of your 55 you have to do, this 1 question is going to have 3 or 4 sub-questions inside of it. I don't like that at all, but that's what you'll experience. And then there is the simlet. So the simlet is like a testlet. It's several multiple choice questions built into one sort of user interface here. But unlike the router simulation where they're testing you to see, do you know how to configure something from scratch? Do you know how to fix something that's broken? This is more about identifying what's broken. Not necessarily fixing it, but identifying it. So for example, they might ask you a question like, here, what is the IP address of an interface? So you'd have to click on a device and know what the appropriate show command is, the iOS command that begins with the word show, to identify the IP address. Select it, go on to the next question. So these simlets here are really just testing your ability to know what is the appropriate verification command, usually beginning with the word show, that will identify what they're looking for so I can get out of this thing and move on to the next one. So those are the types of exam questions you're going to see. And also with a simlet like this, you might get anywhere from 1 to maybe 3 of these as well. So the vast majority of questions you're going to get are going to be multiple choice with a few pepperings of these simlets and testlets and router simulations in there as well. How well did I do? This is something you'll know. Now, when you're done and you press I'm finished with the exam, you will know immediately how well you did. You will know if you passed. It'll tell you, congratulations, you passed, or it'll tell you, I'm sorry, you're an idiot, you didn't pass. Well, it won't necessarily say that, but it'll say, you know, a passing score was 810 out of 1,000, and you got, congratulations, 900. Or it'll say, I'm sorry, you only got 25 out of 1,000. You know, whatever the score is, so you'll know if you passed or failed. Now, unfortunately, it won't tell you what specific questions you failed. It doesn't give you that level of detail. So if I go back here to the page, and I'll talk more about this coming up in the next section about, you know, how do I study for this? But if you go onto any one of these, you know, the ICND1, ICND2, or in this case it's the composite exam, you'll see here there's a section called Review the Exam Topics. And this takes you to what's called the exam blueprint. So each blueprint is broken up into like major topics like networking fundamentals, LAN switching fundamentals, and then you can expand each one of these to get a bulleted list of the detailed things they want you to know for each one of these topics. Now, how does this relate to your testing experience? Well, when you're done with the exam, it'll actually say, you got 90% correct of network fundamentals. You got 15% correct of routing technologies. So if you do fail the exam, and you probably will because statistics say that like something like 70 or 75% of all the people that take the CCNA for the first time fail it. So be prepared for that. That's probably going to be you. You'll walk out there knowing that, wow, I did absolutely awesome on routing technologies and I totally blew it on LAN switching technologies. Unfortunately, you won't know what specific questions in LAN switching technologies you didn't do so well on. You'll just know that category you didn't do so great on. So in a section coming up here in just a second, I'm going to talk about, okay, so walking out of the testing center, having this very fresh, this very recent knowledge of how well I did and what questions I had to guess on, what do you do with that information that's fresh in your brain, fresh in your memory to help you the next time you take the exam? So we'll get into that. But before we do, we're done with the testing experience section, and I want to see if we have any kind of Q&A. So I'm going to go here and take a look and see if you guys have any unanswered questions. All right, so I'm just going to start with the bottom here, and then I'm going to work my way up. Somebody's asking a question about GNS3, and I'll talk a little bit more about GNS3 as we go along. You know, preparing for your CCNA, one of the things you need to do is hands-on practice. To get familiar with the software, you got to use it, right? It's just sort of like, you know, Microsoft Windows. How'd you learn Microsoft Windows? By using a laptop or a PC that had Microsoft Windows in it. Same thing with these routers and switches. You have to find some way of getting access to a router or switch so you can start practicing the commands and get them into your brain. Well, GNS3 is an emulator. It's a way that you can take Cisco iOS software without actually buying a router or a switch and get it to run on your laptop as if you were working with a router or switch. It's a great thing to use. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But GNS3 has some limitations as far as what types of routers and switches it supports and what types it does not support. If you're curious about more details of GNS3, I actually do have a video series on that where I go into that in pretty good detail. So let me show you how you would find that. You could just go to members.ine.com once again. And if you have an All-Access Pass, an All-Access Pass here at INE gives you access to all of our videos. Like it says, all access. So whether you're studying for Cisco or CompTIA or, software-defined networking, we have thousands of videos, and All-Access Pass gives you access to them. So I'm just going to click on that right now. And from here, I'm just going to type in GNS. And here's what you want to look at, this course called Getting Started with GNS 3. It's about 5.5 hours, and I go into all the details of what is GNS 3, how do you find an iOS image, how do you download the software and get it working. So this will hopefully answer the vast majority of questions you might have about GNS 3. Let's see here. Are there any other unanswered questions I can get to? Looks like most of you guys are doing a really good job at seeing questions from each other and answering those questions. I'll answer another common question, which I've sort of seen it hinted at around here in some of the questions you guys are posting. Another common question that comes up is, okay, after I get my CCNA, actually, let me back up a little bit. Which CCNA to get? Because there's not just one, right? There's a CCNA Routing and Switching, CCNA Security, CCNA Wireless. Which one should you start with? I typically recommend to people, and I think you'll hear this echoed from others, that you start with your CCNA Routing and Switching. Vast majority of those other CCNAs are built upon the foundation of routing and switching. Even Wi-Fi, even wireless, right? You wouldn't necessarily think that routing and switching has anything to do with wireless, but your wireless access points are in the ceiling, connect back to a switch, most likely. And so if you don't know how that switch works, if you don't know how it operates, good luck connecting that access point to that switch. And a whole bunch of other stuff really uses routing and switching as the foundational base. So I definitely recommend you get your routing and switching CCNA first. Then a common question is, what do I do after that? Do I get my CCNP routing and switching? Do I go for another CCNA and a specialty? The CCNA routing and switching is a great start. You're going to learn a ton of stuff getting your CCNA routing and switching. But I would strongly recommend that you pursue your CCNP routing and switching after that. I really wouldn't recommend that you branch off into another CCNA specialty until you have a CCNP routing and switching under your belt. At that point, once you've gotten that, you know routing and switching really, really well. And you should feel very comfortable at that point branching off into a CCNA Security, CCNA Wireless, or you could continue going up the chain and try to get your CCIE in routing and switching. But I'd really start with routing and switching and take it up to the CCNP level before you think about branching off into a different specialty after that. That's my advice for that. Let me just scroll up here. There are a lot of questions. Let me just see if there's any others that I can answer. A lot of questions are on resources to use, what kind of resource, what kind of books, how do I get onto labs and things like that, which I'm going to be covering in the next section. So I think we'll keep going when we get to that. Okay, so let's get into the next section here. Which is going to be on the topics of the exam. Oh, someone's also asking a very good question. How long is the ICND1 valid until you take the ICND2? That is something I would actually go directly to their websites to get answered. So for example, if we go to current exams and we click on CCNA routing and switching, it should mention in here, study and learn, training, we don't care about that, take exam, okay, let's see, ND1, register, exam policies and requirements. That's what we're going to look for, is exam policies and requirements. Okay, so you can't be under the age of 13 and take it. We don't really care about all that stuff. What we care about is, let's see, confidentiality, discounts, vouchers, exam violations, retaking exams. Post-exam policies, confidential certification tracking system, recertification. And yeah, recertification, I also want to mention that. Once you get your CCNA, it's not good forever. The CCNA exams expire after a couple of years. So you have to recertify your, actually I think CCNA might be good every 3 years. About recertification. Let's take a look at that. How to recertify. Okay, yeah, so your CCNA are good for 3 years, and then before the 3 years is up, you have to retake it again to recertify. Once you get up to the expert level, like the CCIE, if you go that far, that's only good for 2 years, and then they force you to go through all that pain and misery again before 2 years is up. I don't have an immediate answer. I can't find it in here as far as once you take the CCNA, let's say once you take the ICND 1, how long you have to take the ICND 2. Let's just look here real quickly under CCNA routing and switching, and let's go directly to the ICND 2 exam itself. Let's click on this. Okay. Now this is just taking me back to the main certification. This is not helping. I don't care about the main one. I want to find out about, wait a second, current policies and requirements. Oh, this is all CCIE stuff. Wait, exam and testing. No, this is, I know it's somewhere in here. It gives some information. Something in my memory tells me you had a year. Like after you took the ICND 1 before you had to take the ICND 2. Also, if you take the ICND 1 exam, technically you're getting a certification just with that. If you've heard of the CCENT, the Cisco Certified Entry-Level Networking Technician or whatever it's called, that's the ICND 1. So just simply by taking the ICND 1 and passing it, you get your CCENT. So actually I believe, because those are good for, all those things are good for 3 years. So technically I think you could get your CCENT, and if before that expires, so you got 3 years before that expires, if within that 3-year window you then take the ICND 2 and you pass it, now you've got your CCNA. So that is the way it should work, because the CCENT is good for 3 years once you've got it. That doesn't expire for 3 years. So there's nothing that's forcing you to take the ICND 2. You could just stop with your CCENT if that's all you want to get. So that should work out well. And someone's also posting in the link for the CCENT research. So yeah, that'll be good once you put that in there. All right, let's move on forward here. The topics. So now we're going to be talking about how do I know what to study, right? And how do I know what depths to study? So let's go back to the blueprints. I talked briefly about that. I want to spend a little bit more time in the blueprints now. So for that, I'm going to go back here. And so right now we are looking at the ICND 2 exam. And so to get to the blueprint, on any of these, from the CCNA all the way to the CCIE, they'll all have somewhere where it says review the exam topics. And like I said, it'll give you a high-level overview of the various topic levels, but you're really going to want to drill down here. So for example, LAN switching technologies. You're going to want to click on Show Details. And these bullet points give you really the details of what you want to study. So you'll want to make sure that you study all this stuff. And sometimes some of these things are fairly ambiguous. For example, a common question of this is, okay, so it tells me it wants me to study, let's take spanning tree as an example. It wants me to study PVST and rapid PVST plus. But how much level of detail do I need to know? I mean, literally there are books written just on spanning tree. How much level of detail do I need to know to satisfy that one bullet point? So I'm going to answer that. So before I do though, I just want to emphasize this is your first place you want to check. You want to go to the blueprint of the ICND1 or the ICND2. You want to expand each one of these things. And this is where you're going to get your first level of detail as far as what topics you want to study. Now I'm going to tell you something that's a little unfortunate. It's true, but it's unfortunate. And you'll hear this from other people as well. You may get hit with questions during the CCNA that were not on this blueprint. I will tell you that 95%, maybe even more, of the questions that you will see will adhere to what you see on the blueprint. But every once in a while, you may, and Cisco will actually say this, they'll somewhere, I'm not sure where it is, but somewhere on their website it does say you may get questions that are not included in the blueprint. I think that is terrible. It's like, how do you study for something if you don't know what you're supposed to study for? Thankfully, like I said, it's maybe, 2 or 3 questions at the absolute most that might fall into that category, but it does happen from time to time. So, just have to be aware that that's the case. All right, so let's get back to the original question. How do I know what level of depth I need to study for a particular topic, like spanning tree? Okay, so to answer that question, I typically refer people to the Cisco Press books. So Cisco has come out with their own study guides for all of their exams, and they've got their own publishing company called Cisco Press. And you'll see there's a lot of books out there on the ICND1, the ICND2. Many of them are very good. Many of them are very well written. But in my personal opinion, and this is just mine, you can take it for what it's worth, if a book is put out by Cisco Press, that means that the topics in that book, the quizzes in that book, if there are any, everything in that book had to receive Cisco's blessing. So I would assume that a Cisco Press book should contain the topics that Cisco wants you to learn, and it contains the level of detail Cisco wants you to learn for that topic. Other books that are not Cisco Press, no guarantee of that, right? Something that's not Cisco Press is just something that was written by somebody who thinks that they know the CCNA very well, and they might know the CCNA very well, and they might write very, very well. But do you have any, what level of warm, fuzzy comfort do you have that that particular person included the appropriate amount of depth and the appropriate topics for the test? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I personally would feel more comfortable reading a book that Cisco has blessed, that has gone through their editorial process, as opposed to somebody else's book. So for an example, how do you get these books? Well, a great website I would recommend that you go to is Safari Online Books. You can always buy a book from like Amazon or something like that, but each one of these books is about like 500 or 600 pages big, and anywhere from like $30 on up for a single book. Whereas Safari Online Books, and I'll show you that. So I'll say Safari Books Online, that's what you want. This is a website that you subscribe to. I'm not sure what the current price is for this. Actually, it says right here, pricing. Let's take a look. How much do they currently want for this? So right now it is $39 a month. Now you might think, wow, that's kind of expensive, but let's put it in perspective here. A single book, a single Cisco Press book could run you $39. Just one book. And that's just for one exam. Here, when you sign up to Safari Online Books for $39 a month, you're getting access to thousands of books online. Now, I'm not employed by, nor am I getting compensated by Safari Online Books in any way. I just love them. I use them all the time because for me, one of the ways that I learn, one of the ways I study best is if I'm studying something, for example, on spanning tree, reading it in just one book doesn't seem to make it sink in for me. For me, I like to read about the same topic in like 4 or 5 different places. Read about spanning tree in like 2 or 3 books and maybe 2 or 3 documents online. And by seeing all these different authors' perspectives, their different diagrams, the different questions they pose, that really helps it to gel in my own head. Well, if I was to buy all those books, I'd be poor, right? I wouldn't be able to do that. But I've got access to tons of books here. So for example, when you sign into Safari, after purchasing it for a month or so, you'll see here they've got books on just gobs of different stuff. So let's just take, for example, if I go in here under topics, I haven't actually looked under topics, so let's see what they're going to show me here. You can see here they've got topics for enterprise, Python, June OS, business and management. So you know how to spend the millions of dollars you earn once you get your CCNA, analytics, all kinds of stuff. But let's focus on the CCNA. So let's say I want to find the book for I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this here, the 100-105 exam. I believe that was one of them. So that's one of Cisco's exams. So I'll just hit enter. Actually, I probably should put Cisco because there might be some other exams out there that are 100-105, but it looks like this is getting it here. Now you can see there's a lot of books in here. Wendell Odom and Kevin Wallace have written tons of books for the IC&D. But what I would want to do is I'd actually want to put in 100-105 official. Because Cisco Press comes up with sort of 2 types of books for every certification. They come up with what's called official certification guides, and they also come up with what's called foundation learning guides. The foundation learning guides typically go into a little bit more depth. They're a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker to read than the official certification guides. I recommend you look at both of them. One of the nice things about the official certification guides is that by and large, they pretty much all have quizzes. They all have, at the beginning or at the end of every chapter, they have anywhere from like 7 to 10 questions to test your knowledge on it. And so that gives you a good idea about, how is a question going to be written on the exam that covers this topic? Do I really know this topic? In the foundation learning guides, you'll get deeper level of understanding, but they generally don't have quiz questions in there. So that's why I like to reference both of them. Also, you'll see here for the official certification guides, a lot of times they'll have the certification guide, then they'll have an academic edition of the certification guide. I've noticed that the academic editions a lot of times don't have the questions. They don't have the review or the quiz questions. I'm not sure why. So that's why I prefer to go just to the official certification guide books. I love those questions they've got in there. So the whole question here is spanning tree. It was a bullet point in the blueprint. How much level of detail do I need to know? Well, I would just go to the table of contents, scroll down here and try to find spanning tree in that. Where are you? Spanning tree, IPv4, or TCP, basic Ethernet LANs. It's going to be in here somewhere. Switch management, implementing virtual LANs. Okay, I'm getting close. Of course, I could always go to the index. I must have passed it because it would be in the LAN switch. Wait, this is the 100-105. This is the IC&D 1. IC&D 1 does not expect you to know spanning tree, so it's not going to be in here. Okay, so I'm looking in the wrong book. So I need the 200-105. So 200-105 official. All right, and they also have videos in here, which I don't watch those myself, but those are available to you. So here we go, official certification guide for IC&D 2. This is where I should have been looking for spanning tree, because that's where they want you to test on that. So Ethernet LANs, here we go. Spanning tree protocol and concepts. Okay. So at the beginning, like I said, it'll give you some quiz questions, and then the answers to the questions are typically either at the end of the chapter or in an appendix section at the back of the book. And you'll just go through here. And generally I tell people, hey, if it's covered in here, it's a candidate to be on the test. So if you see something in here, get ready, you might be tested on that. And conversely, if you don't see something covered in here, I really wouldn't worry about it. You might be tested on it, but probably not. For example, if I just pulled up a white paper on spanning tree, I might spend my time reading a whole bunch of stuff that's only covered at the CCNP level or the CCIE level. But if I'm reading it in an official certification guide, I have some comfort, some confidence knowing that this level of depth is what they want me to know for the topic. All right, so that's the blueprint. That's the Cisco official press books. Now, if you get access to Safari online books, like I said, there's lots and lots of books out there that you can skim through. Another great thing about Safari online books is if I go to the home page here, maybe I'm interested in a particular topic, like, let's see here at the CCNP, maybe I'm interested in Cisco port security. I'm not sure if they would have a hyphen in there or not. I know that port security is something on the CCNA. Well, I could scroll through here and let me make this a little bit bigger. And it'll actually zoom in on, okay, you know, here's a section of a book on port security, implementing Cisco networks. Here's something else on port security. So you can search through all these books on just a particular topic that you're interested in reading on. That's another great thing of Safari online books. Now, also a lot of people ask me, what's the best book to read? You know, and that of course is a very subjective question because different authors appeal to different people. Their writing style, the types of diagrams they use or not use, whether they include questions or not. So here's another useful tool I want you to be aware of. You probably are already aware of this, but I'm going to go to Amazon.com. Okay. And I'm going to type in Cisco CCNA. And I'm going to search in books. And one great thing that a lot of these books have, for example, let's click on this one right here, the official certification guide. Make that a little bit bigger. As you'll see here, they'll have this look inside feature, which I think is great if you've never actually looked at this. So without even buying the book, you can click on look inside, and several pages of the book are available to you for review. So for example, let me just scroll down here. So here's a section, I don't even know what they're talking about here in this case. It looks like they're talking about pings. It's got a diagram on echo request and echo reply. But I can just spend a few minutes reading through this and get a pretty good feel. You know, do I like the way this author writes? Is he or she clear and concise? Do the diagrams make sense? You know, or this book stinks. I hate this. I'm not going to spend my time wasting my time on this. And so I can go back and find another one. So just by spending, you know, 20 or 30 minutes, I can go through several CCNA books. See, what's another one in here? Here's one from Todd Lamel. This also has look inside. So I can click on this one and spend a little bit of time looking through it. Oh, cool. This guy's got some practice exams in here. That's an awesome feature. So yeah, this looks like a fantastic book on some stuff already just by looking at it. So, and this is also great for using along with Safari because, you know, in Safari online books, you're going to have dozens and dozens and dozens of books on the CCNA. And, you know, you don't necessarily want to waste your time reading books that are poorly written. Or maybe it's not poorly written, but it's just not written in a style that works for you. So using that look inside feature of Amazon, you can just quickly look up the book and see within a few minutes, hey, I like this. I like the diagrams. I like the way this is written. So I would absolutely recommend that you use that particular aspect of Amazon, the look inside feature. All right, so that is reading, right? So I've shown you the blueprint. We expanded the blueprint. And then in order to answer the question of what level of detail, I said, hey, read. Of course, you can also always Google something. For example, I could go to, and also Cisco's website itself. You know, if you spend some time on Cisco's website, let's go back here for ICND2. They have a lot of resources available as well. Recommended training, some training videos. And of course, their videos are not nearly as good as INE, but hey, it's another resource to you. A lot of these videos you have to pay extra for. Wow, $750. Woo! Okay, I'll tell you what, send me a check and I'll show up at your house and train you for that amount of money. But, you know, there's a bunch of stuff on here that you can look at, or you could also use our good friend Google, and I could type in CCNA spanning dash tree. That's just one topic. And here's a Cisco Press article that takes something out of their Cisco Press book on that topic. So there's lots of ways. Now, let's talk about videos, for example. So let me start with what's dear and near to my heart, which are the INE videos. So let's talk a little bit about that. So once again, if you go to your members account for INE.com and click on AllAccess Pass. Now, maybe you don't have an AllAccess Pass. Let's take it from that standpoint. You don't have an AllAccess Pass. How do you see what videos INE has available for that? Well, you can go to streaming.ine.com. And from here, you can see all the videos that we have available. So for example, you would want to click on, I'm going to make this full screen here, Cisco, CCNA, and we're interested in routing and switching. And you can see these are all the video courses we have on routing and switching. Now, what do I mean by video courses? I mean each one of these, for example, let's take a look at this one right here for ICND2. This is a series of videos I created a while back. It's about 23.5 hours of videos. And so these video courses are collections of videos, multiple videos bundled into a course. So you could purchase just the CCNA series as a standalone thing. You know, if right now getting an all-access pass doesn't work for you, you know, budget-wise or whatever, a lot of these things are available as standalone options. For example, you can go to INE.com and click on the little shopping cart in the upper right corner here. Continue browsing. And you know, what products does INE have that's based on CCNA? So I'll click on Cisco. And I want to do routing and switching, and I want to do associate level. And you can see here we have some standalone stuff. For example, here's the composite exam for $119. You can get all the videos that I've created for the ICND1 and the ICND2. So this is a lot of videos right here. So you can get those. If you scroll back, you'll also see there are other video collections you can get. We have some practice exams, which I would strongly recommend that you take. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a next section. But there's also, in here, if I go back to the All-Access Pass, one big advantage you'll have by getting an All-Access Pass that you won't have just by purchasing like the CCNA set of videos is there's a lot of one-off videos that either I or other instructors have created that are at the CCNA or at the CCNP level, but were not bundled into a CCNA course or CCNP course. For example, let's take spanning tree. Spanning, I'll just type in spanning. So for example, you've got rapid spanning tree and MST. Let's see here, where's something else? I know I created, okay, like right here, CCNA and CCNP, CCNA routing and switching technologies, spanning tree part 1. This is a video course I created. Well, this is actually a single video here, but I create a series of videos. Let's just do spanning tree. See what we come up with. Okay, so you can see here, here's a spanning tree part 2, spanning tree part 1, part 3. So these are sort of individual one-off videos on topics that aren't included in a bundle. And the only way you have access to these is by looking at the AllAccess Pass. So there's a lot of these very specialized technical videos that are only placed at the AllAccess Pass section. And so that's actually very useful as well. So that covers our INE CCNA videos. And so now let me, I think that covers everything I want to talk about how do you identify what topics to study. Start with the blueprints. From there, go to the Cisco Press books. That's how you also identify the level of detail you need. A lot of also another benefit of watching videos, and I'll just speak for our videos, I can't talk about anybody else's videos. When I create videos on a topic, I like to also bring in a lot of real world examples. You know, to me, learning about port security really comes into focus if I can envision where I would use it. You know, where in a network would I use it? You know, in my company, where would I use that feature? What problem is solved by using this feature? And so I try to put that into a lot of my videos as well. A lot of times in books, you won't necessarily get that. A lot of times books will explain to you, here's what the feature is, here's how you configure it, here's how it works, but they won't really paint a picture for you as far as why would I use it? Where would I use it? Under what circumstances will this not really work for what I need to do? And a lot of times in videos, at least in our videos, INE takes pride in the fact that we do that. All the way up to the CCIE level, both myself, Brian McGann, other instructors that we have here really try to focus on what's the practical usage of this feature or protocol. And so that's another benefit of using videos in conjunction with books. So let's take a moment here and see if there's any questions and answers or questions that I can help you guys with. Someone's pointing out that the Cisco Learning Network, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can find at the Cisco Learning Network. Practice exams in there, videos and papers in there. Some of it's free, a lot of it you have to pay for, but there's a lot of good resources in there. One person's asking where they can get a CCNA exam simulator that they can use as a practice tool before diving into the CCNA exam. Let me just real quickly check and see. I don't want to jump too far ahead. But let me check and see if, let's see here, I've got study tips coming up. In my study tips section, I'm going to talk about things like how do you get on a router or switch to practice? Where do you find practice exams? So I will be covering that in the next section. Someone's asking, can you refer a really good source for getting packet tracer labs? Like, what's the best website? Well, I know how to get Packet Tracer itself. Packet Tracer is sort of like GNS3. It's a software simulator, so if you don't want to buy real routers or switches, or you don't want to rent time on racks that have routers and switches, like GNS3, you could download Packet Tracer to your laptop and sort of practice routing and switching without actually getting on real gear. Now, as far as Packet Tracer labs are concerned, like people that have pre-built labs, I don't know. I'm sure there are some. I don't know off the top of my head a website. Maybe one of you guys can recommend. I don't see anybody here recommending one, but if anybody does know, I'd be curious to know it. And yeah, there's a big reason I was focusing on spanning tree. Spanning tree is a big part of the CCNA. You absolutely want to know spanning tree in and out. And I'll talk coming up here about, so what are some of the major heavy hitters of topics you need to know. Somebody's asking if there's a free second chance to take the test if you fail. Nope, there is not, unfortunately. If you take the test and fail it, I believe I scan past it really quickly, but you have to wait 15 days before you take it again, and you got to pay for it again. So unfortunately, there's no free retakes. You'll have to pay that $165 to take it again. And also, as far as the ICND 1 and the ICND 2 are concerned, you don't have to take the ICND 1 first. It's just that the ICND 1 starts out with basic concepts and then builds on that in the ICND 2. I mean, nothing's forcing you. In other words, they won't say, oh, you've signed up for the ICND 2, but a prerequisite is the ICND 1. That's not the case. It's just that I've never heard of anybody taking the ICND 2 first, followed by the ICND 1. But I just want to point that out there that, theoretically, you could take the ICND 2 first and then go back and take the ICND 1. It just doesn't make a lot of logical sense to do that. I'm just trying to see if there's any other unanswered questions here. Yep, subnetting and IP addressing is a big topic. You should expect to get a, and that also depends on whether you're taking ICND 1 or ICND 2. The ICND 1 exam is where they really introduce you to the concept of IP addressing and subnetting. So that's where you're going to get more of those IP addressing and subnetting questions. You'll get some of them in ICND 2 as well, but it's more of an emphasis in the ICND 1 exam. And yes, even when you recertify, you have to pay for the exam. Nothing is free, unfortunately. Yep. Okay, so I don't see any other unanswered questions. It's been about an hour and a half since I started. So let's go ahead and take a quick, I know I need a break. I'm assuming you guys do too. Let's take a quick 10-minute break, and then I will come back and resume the course after that. So I will see you guys in 10 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and fade to black here, and I'll put a note in the chat as well that we're going to do that. And I will see you guys 10 minutes from now. Practice exams. So you will definitely want to test yourself over and over and over again as you go through your CCNA studying. And practice exams are a great way to do this. Let me show you some examples of where you could find some. So I already mentioned that one of the first things I want to point out to your attention is the I&E practice exams that we have. So I'm actually going to go to my members account here so I can actually access them. So Cisco, CCNA, routing and switching. And we have a practice exam for the ICND 1 and for the ICND 2. Let me find those in here. Actually, it's combined, routing and switching practice exam. Hold on just a second here. Let me make sure that I'm looking at this the right way. No, we do have. Okay. Not sure why it wasn't, maybe I just overlooked it, but when I typed in the word practice, you can see here we do have two. So we've got an ICND 1. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. 100-105 ICND 1 practice exam, and we also have a 200-105 ICND 2 practice exam. So I'm just going to click on the ICND2 practice exam. I'm going to begin a practice exam attempt. So you can see here, this is going to give you 60 multiple choice questions that are based on the ICND2 topics. And in order to, as closely as possible, replicate your testing experience, you'll have 90 minutes, 1 hour and 30 minutes to complete the exam. So let's say I want to start taking this. Begin practice exam attempt. It loads the exam. And one thing you should be familiar with is, once you have access to this, you can take these practice exams as many times as you want. There's no, once and done type thing here. You can take it 50 times if you want. Main thing to remember is that much of this practice exam is locally cached on your laptop. And why that's important is because if you take it once and then you decide to take it again, if you don't clear your cache, clear your history, clear your cookies, and clear all that stuff out from Chrome or whatever it is that you use, chances are you'll be seeing the exact same questions you got the last time. So you want to make sure that before you retake the exam, you clear out all that stuff from your browser so you get it freshly downloaded to you, so you get a new set of questions. So even though there are 60 questions, they're pulled from a much larger question pool. But I just want to make sure you're aware that you want to clear your cache every time you do this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Begin Practice Exam. Okay, so from here, you'll see, it'll start out, it'll tell you how many minutes you've got remaining up at the top here. And if you have to pause, now this is not something you can actually do in the real test, but if you need to walk away to eat lunch or take a conference call or something, you can always pause the exam and then you can resume it later on. It tells you how many questions you've got left. In this case, I'm on question 1 out of 56 questions. And it'll say select the best answer or select 2, so I'll just select that one here. I'm just going to randomly do like 4 or 5 questions. Select the best answer, let's just do that one. I'm not even reading it at this point. Just want to give you an idea. Select the best answer. There are some in here that have more than one correct answer. Select 3 answers. All right, let's do that. Now, let's say I've gone through this and I say, okay, I'm done. I don't want to do the whole 56 questions. I just want to end it right now. You can do that. End and submit for grading. Submit. And it'll show you here, oh wow, just randomly I got question number 2 correct, but it'll show you all the ones you got incorrect. So for example, question number 3, I'll select that. And you can see here, this is the one I selected, and the one with the green check mark is the one that was the correct answer. So you can see by going through this what your results were and what the correct answers were. And like I said, we've got this for an ICND1 and an ICND2. So I would definitely recommend utilizing that. Like I also mentioned in the previous segment, I would definitely pick a book, either through Safari online books, or if you're not going to do that, if you're going to buy a real book, a book that has questions built into it. Also, a lot of times when you buy the real books, in the back, especially the Cisco Press books, a lot of times they'll have a CD in the back, and those CDs will come with exam simulators and questions. Now, the simulators on there are not really the same as the simulators you'll get in the real exam. For that, you'll need hands-on lab practice, but you'll get access to a lot of multiple choice questions as well. And just Google it. There's a lot of people who've put, CCNA practice exams online as well. Also, Cisco's Learning Network has Cisco practice exams you can take, most of which you have to pay extra for, but they do have, a smattering of questions here and there that you can take for free. So I definitely do that over and over and over again. Now, what else do you want to do? Flashcards, and get your friends and family involved. I think flashcards are a great way to get this stuff deep in your memory. So there's 2 types of flashcards, online and real flashcards. If you like the online kind, you can certainly do that. I'll go over here. There's many types, there's many places that do that. One resource that I sometimes use is called StudyBlue. StudyBlue.com. And from here, you can create your own online flashcards. For example, for a while there, I was trying to learn Python, and so I started creating some flashcards for myself. And so you can create the flashcards, then once you want to test yourself on it, you can click on Study Now, and I'll select all the cards in a random order, Study Now, and then I can read the card and, okay, what do I think is the answer to this? All right, did I get the answer correct? There it is. Now, if I got the answer wrong, I'll select thumbs down. It'll keep a record of that. Okay, what do I think the answer is to this one? Let's see here. Okay, I got that one right. And so you see here, it keeps in the upper corner a record of the ones that you've gotten right and wrong. So the next time you come to study, when you do study again, you could say, okay, I just want to study the ones that are wrong. Or I want to study everything, and it keeps a record of this. So these types of websites are useful to track your progress. I personally, these are okay. There's nothing wrong with these. I also like using real flashcards along with this. And here's the benefit. I know it's going to sound kind of weird, but I'm telling you, when you're studying for this stuff, you have to immerse yourself in it, right? So if you got some real flashcards, 3.5 by 5 note cards, right on the front, a question, right on the back, the answer, and it has been proven when it comes to learning. Now, I don't have a degree in like education and learning and stuff like that, but I know people who do, and I've read some stuff on this, and they say that the more of your senses you can get involved in the learning process, the better it is at retaining stuff into your long-term memory. In other words, using your eyeballs to read something where you're just using your sense of sight, right? But when you're watching a video, now it's your sense of sight and your sense of hearing as well, right? That's another great thing about flashcards. Now you're actually using your hands. You're writing out a question. You're turning it over. You're writing out an answer. You're having to think about, what would be a good question I want to quiz myself on? What's a great answer for this? That's why I really like flashcards. Another benefit of real flashcards is, hey, you go to lunch, grab some of your flashcards, take them with you. You're driving. When you get to a red stoplight, pick up a flashcard from the seat next to you and look at it and quiz yourself, right? When you're at home, say, hey, honey, could you spend like 15 minutes and quiz me? Hand your wife or your husband the flashcards and have them quiz you. Your spouse loves it to see you embarrassed and flummoxed when you get an answer wrong, right? They love to embarrass you. So get your friends, get your family, get your dog and cat involved. Whoever you can, hand those flashcards out and have people quiz you. And they're always available. You got to run to the bathroom? Well, I'll let you paint a picture. But the idea is, with that real flashcard, you can take them with you wherever you go, and they're always available. With this online stuff, well, you got to have a tablet with you. You got to have your smartphone with you. You got to have an internet connectivity to get access to this. So another nice thing of the online stuff is a lot of these online flashcards also allow you to insert like images and stuff like that. So for example, you could get onto a router and grab a screenshot of the routing table of that router. And then you could put that screenshot into your flashcard with a question of which part of the output below shows the next hop interface for the 10-10-10 network. And in the back, you could put that same screenshot, but then put a little circle around the next hop interface. You could do fancy graphics. Can't really do that on a 3.5 by 5 note card. But I absolutely, definitely recommend that you use flashcards and create flashcards when you're doing it. And also, just one other thing about that. It's all well and good to use other people's flashcards. Like, that's another benefit of using Study Blue, right? There's lots of people who have created flashcard sets on here that you can access. A lot of other websites are like that. There's actually flashcard sets you can purchase on Amazon and stuff. That's great, all well and good. But once again, you're getting more of your senses, you're getting more of your brain into this if you think of the questions yourself. You write the question, you write the answer. I think that's a lot more effective than using questions that other people have written for you. Just my personal opinion. Study with a group, if possible. This is also a great way to get involved. Like, for example, if you're studying on your own, It's real easy to sort of lose momentum, to procrastinate, to put things on the back burner, and all of a sudden you intended to get your CCNA in 3 months, and now it's 9 months later and you're no further along than you were 3 months ago. If you're studying with a group, they can hold you accountable. You can say, okay, everybody, this time next week, let's get together and we're going to talk about spanning tree. We're going to talk about the root bridge. Or this time next week, John, we want you to have 5 questions you've created on the topic of VLAN trunks. Sally, we want you to have 5 questions you've created on the topic of VTP. I want you to present it to the group and then have the group answer the questions and give their feedback on your questions. You know, holding each other accountable is a great thing when you're studying, and it helps prevent you from getting sidetracked, helps prevent you from procrastinating. Another way that group study is great, if possible, if you're actually studying with a group of people in the same room as you, and you can study with people online, there's group studies online as well, but if you're studying with people in a room, one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it to somebody else. I'll tell you, if I said, okay, so next week, Sally, I want you to do a 10-minute presentation for us on spanning tree. Sally will learn more getting ready and putting that 10-minute presentation together than she ever would just studying on her own. Teaching it to other people is a great way. Plus, when you're teaching it to other people, you have to be prepared for the questions that they're going to ask you. I'm going to ask Sally some questions on spanning tree, which is going to force her to study even more in preparation for her presentation. Make YouTube videos, right? That's another way of teaching people. You know, don't be afraid. Go ahead and say, okay, by this time next week, I'm going to create a 15-minute YouTube video on 802.1q trunking, and I'm going to create PowerPoints on it, and I'm going to put it up there. Another great way of forcing yourself to learn this stuff is by teaching other people. Refer back to old topics often. So what am I referring to here? So I mentioned that in your study process, you're going to be taking probably a minimum of 3 to like 6 months to do this. And it's very easy to, 3 months in, completely forget everything you studied in weeks 1, 2, and 3. This is where flashcards come into play. Create flashcards as you go along. As you're watching a video, create a flashcard. I recommend, hey, people, if you're going to watch like a 30-minute video, don't watch it end to end. Hit that pause button frequently as you're watching a video. Pause it, create a flashcard, question answer. Play, pause it, create a flashcard. And then when you're done with the video, don't move to the next one until you can answer all of your own questions that you've created in your flashcards. So this also goes back to referring to old topics. If you have no way of testing yourself on stuff that you learned 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago, that stuff is not going to stay in your memory. So as you're learning new things, you want to go back to those older topics again and again and again. This also has to do with the next topic I want to talk about, which is frequent lab practice. So the CCNA is really at a high level testing you on 2 sort of basic things. The theory. Do you know what this protocol does? Do you know why it was made? What problem it was designed to solve? How it works? And then the practical. On a Cisco router or switch, do you know the commands to make that protocol operational? Do you know the commands to confirm that it's operating as it should? Do you know the commands to troubleshoot it if it's not operating? Well, all that theory, you can get that from books. You can get that with your flashcards. You can get that from videos. But to get the operational aspect, you really need to have hands-on practice. A lot of those, don't be misled thinking, oh, well, the only time I'm going to have to know the actual commands is when I get to those simulations. And Keith told me that, oh, I might get maybe 3 or 4 simulations out of the whole exam, so I'm not going to worry about it. That's wrong. A lot of those multiple choice questions you're going to get are going to be based on your knowledge of the commands. You're going to have questions that say something like, given this output, given the screen output right here, which of the following commands would be appropriate to issue to accomplish this objective? Or which of these commands would fix this problem? So you're going to be tested in a variety of ways on your knowledge of what is the appropriate Cisco iOS command to get something done. And the best way to do that is to do it, is to get onto a router or a switch. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. This is a very hot topic here. You know, how do you get onto routers and switches? So there's really three sort of overall ways you can do this. Method number one, you can buy your own equipment. Okay, and that's a good option. You know, these days, routers and switches, you can get them fairly cheaply. You don't have to get this big, you know, $400,000 Nexus switch in order to practice switching. A lot of routers and switches you can get for like $100 or less. So a real simple CCNA home lab you could build, I would say would consist of an absolute minimum of 2 switches. And if those switches are multi-layer switches, in other words, if they're capable of routing and switching, you could probably get by with 2 switches and 2 routers, a total of 4 devices, because then you could do routing labs with them all acting as routers, and those 2 switches, you could do your spanning tree and stuff with like that. So a minimum of 2 switches and 2 routers. Ideally, if you're going to build your own home lab, I would say you'd want 3 switches and like 4 routers minimum. But you could get away with 2 and 2. So you could buy a lab on eBay or something, or buy new equipment if you want to do that, and then build that at home and play with it. And there's definitely some advantages to that. I mean, not only do you learn the Cisco iOS command line that way, but you learn a lot of the practical aspects of, you know, what's it like to plug and unplug a cable? You know, what happens when you pull out a cable too hard? You might see the end snap off. Oh, so that's what an RJ45 jack looks like when the tab is missing. That's the problems I have with it. It just falls out. You know, you get an experience with what do the lights and the LEDs on the front of the router switch look like when you're turning it on, when you're turning it off. That's stuff that you can't get unless you're physically in front of the device. You will also very quickly learn how hot your room will get when you've got those devices running in there, because they pump out a lot of heat. So the heat and the electrical consumption, that's some of the downside of buying your own stuff and having it at home. So I said there were 3 options. So that's 1, buying your own stuff. Option number 2, which is my preferred approach, is to rent time on somebody else's racks. And so for that, I want to show you I&E's racks real quickly and show you what you can do with that. So once again, if we go to our members account, you'll see here that we've got rack rentals. Now, before I click on that, let me just talk a little bit about rack rentals. If you go to ine.com, you should see under Training Solutions, we've got rack rentals. And if you click on that, this will talk a little bit more about rack rentals. So what are I&E's rack rentals? So we I&E have a really large data center in Nevada. And in Nevada, we've got tons and tons of routers and switches and servers and stuff, which are stuff that you can rent by the hour. So step number 1 is identifying which specific topology you want. We have, for example, for you, because you're taking this course right now, I'm assuming you're interested in the CCNA topology. So we have racks of equipment, which are our CCNA, CCNP racks, which you can rent per hour. And they consist of 3 physical switches, 4 physical routers, and those are also connected to a backbone router, which you don't have access to, but it's injecting routes into your topology, as well as a frame relay switch. So you can rent time on that as you progress in your studies, and that's also perfectly fine for CCNA and CCNP. We also have CCIE level racks. You know, if you get up to that level and you want to practice CCIE security, you want to practice something on firewalls, or you want to practice in a larger environment. For example, our CCIE routing and switching topology is literally like 20 routers and 2 or 3 switches, much larger in scope. And the cost of these varies depending on the size of the topology, the types of equipment in there. So you can see on here, step number 1 is, I would say, identify the rack that you want to use. And so for that, I would go back to the members account, the members page, and I would click on rack rentals. So this shows you each of the racks. So you can see that the CCNA and CCNP routing and switching racks are the least expensive at 3 tokens per hour. Now you might be wondering, wait a second, what is a token? What's this thing called token? Well, so to get time on the racks, just go here to ine.com. You purchase in advance these things called tokens. So training solutions, rack rentals. The least amount you can get is 100 tokens. So of course, 1 token equals $1. So for $100, and we have these on sale a lot, but the retail price is $100 for 100 tokens, or you can go on up from there all the way up to 1,000 tokens or more. You know, you could certainly call into our sales department and say, hey, I want to rent a bunch of tokens for my entire department. I want to buy like 10,000 tokens, you know, something like that. But let's say you start with 100 tokens, so that's $100. Then you go back to here, so you can see that at 3 tokens an hour, that $100 you just spent will get you roughly 33 hours of lab time. And so you would just click on this. First of all, if you click on the rack rental guide for any of these, one of these, if you click on rack rental guide, it'll show you a topology diagram of the rack that you're considering using. And it'll talk a little bit about, you know, how you access the rack, how you do that. So you say, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to spend, you know, this Saturday from 9 a.m. till noon, I want to spend 3 hours on this rack playing around. So I'll click on schedule. And this Saturday is going to be the 14th. I want to select from 9 o'clock a.m. Okay. And I want to do done. And so over here, I want to do it until also the 14th, until 12 o'clock p.m. Done. And now when you click on search, what you're doing is you're saying, is the rack available or are they all used? Generally speaking, the CCNA and CCNP racks, there's always availability on those. So you can see right here, okay, it is available. And I could book it right now for 9 tokens. So it'll take $9. You know, I've already prepaid for this, so if I've got the tokens, you will now have those 3 hours ready and waiting for you. And once your 3 hours is ready, then once you go into it, let's go back here again, rack rentals. So right here you can see I have a rack that's pretty much permanently mine, rack number 1, and this is what I use for all my demonstrations. When I'm teaching a CCNA or CCNP boot camp, this is the rack that I use when I'm developing labs for you guys. This is the rack that I use, so this is always available to me. But you'll see, this is our, once you rent time, you'll see there's a rack available, and you can click on Control Panel. Now, if you click on the Control Panel before your time, like let's say I rent it on Saturday from 9 a.m. till noon, I would see this, but these would all be grayed out. So grayed out means it's not available yet. The fact that they're blue means these are actually available. And so I can get into these devices in one of several ways. I'm not going to go into the details of how you access it, but basically you can telnet into these devices and you have 4 routers and 3 switches available to you. Now you might be wondering, okay, great. What do I do then? What do I do with these 4 routers and 3 switches? My preferred way of studying is to create my own labs. So for example, let's say I'm watching a lab on, or a video on spanning tree, and I'm reading a book on spanning tree, and I'm reading a paper on spanning tree. As I start learning about this, I'm starting to visualize in my head, how could I put this together into a lab? And usually the first question I ask myself is, what is the minimum quantity of equipment I could use to make this work? For example, there might be features out there. For example, when you start learning about something called DMVPM, Dynamic Multi-Point VPNs, when you learn about that, a lot of the pictures and a lot of the topology drawings you'll see that go along with that will show, tons of routers, 15, 20, 30 routers. But technically, to do a lab on DMVPN, you don't need 20 or 30 routers. Yeah, it'd be nice to have that, but who's got the money for that, right? To do a simple lab on DMVPN, you could really do it with a minimum of 3 routers, or even 3 or 4 routers, but 3 routers minimum, but 4 routers ideally. You don't need 20 or 30. So once again, if I'm thinking about spanning tree, right? Spanning tree, really to get some hands-on practice, I need at least 2 switches. 3 is better, but 2 is okay. So as I'm reading on some protocols, I'm watching a video, I'm thinking to myself, what's the minimum quantity of equipment I need if I want to do a lab on this? And so I start envisioning that. And then let's say I'm watching a video, and let's say it's talking about a routing protocol, EIGRP. And part of the video says, okay, EIGRP is a routing protocol. It's how one router talks to another router and says, hey, let me tell you about the routes that I know about. You can use me to get to these distant networks over here. And so it starts talking about, well, how do you get these routers to talk to each other? What commands do you need to configure to get it working? Now I'm starting to think in my head, okay, I can do this with 2 routers, and I'm writing down notes. Okay, so these are the commands to get router 1 to talk to router 2, and router 2 to talk to router 1. And I'm thinking in my head, a good first step would be for me to get access to 2 routers that are connected with a cable and use these commands. And maybe the video will say, and here's the things the routers need to agree on. They need to agree on A, B, and C. If all 3 of these things don't line up, they won't talk to each other. So now I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what would happen if I intentionally don't do A, B, and C. What if I have the 2 routers agree on A and B, but the third point, I intentionally configure it so it's not matching, it's mismatched? I want to see what that's going to look like. Am I going to get an error message? You know, what am I going to see? So I'm starting in my mind to think about how I'm going to put the topology together, and I'm thinking about what are my objectives? Well, my objective is I want to turn on the routing protocol so these 2 routers talk to each other. And I want to intentionally screw it up so I can see what happens when I screw it up. And I want to see what the output is of this show command and this show command when it's working and when it's not working. So by the time my 3 hours or my 2 hours or my 1 hour comes along for this rack of equipment, I've got on a piece of paper a topology diagram that I've drawn. In this case, it's just 2 routers with a link between them. I've listed out objective number 1, make the routers talk to each other. Command, command, command. This is what I want to type in. Objective number 2, screw them up in this way. Command to screw it up. Objective number 3, type in these show commands and see the difference. So I'm creating a lab myself that I'm going to then test on this equipment. So that's one approach. That's what I like to do because it's creative. Once again, it's getting my mind going. A lot of other people prefer to use what's called lab workbooks or labs that other people have put together where they can just go through it and it's got predefined objectives. It's got already in it, you know, here's the commands you want to type. This is what you should see. This is how you want to verify it. And we have that as well. So let me show you real quickly here some of our lab workbooks that you can use in conjunction with these lab racks. So once again, if I go back to the members dashboard here and click on workbooks, and once again, the workbooks that you see will depend on what you've purchased. If you're an AllAccess Pass member, you should see all of the workbooks. Now, if you just purchase like the CCNA package, then you might see 1 or 2 of these workbooks. Let's click on, for example, the CCNA ICND1 lab workbook. So it starts out here, and you can see the high-level descriptions of each of the topics. All right, let's talk about debugging RIP version. Let's talk about dynamic routing with RIP version 2. So this shows you the topology, and all of the CCNA and CCNP workbooks were built using our CCNA and CCNP rack. So it's assuming that you're renting time on the rack. So the first thing is, you know, a benefit of using these workbooks and these racks is a lot of these workbooks will say, download this configuration template. In other words, if I go back to the rack, let me go back to that here. Go back to the control panel for the rack that I've rented time on. You will see in the left corner here where it says select configuration. These are all sorts of pre-configurations that are scripted. So for example, if you're doing the CCNA routing and switching workbook, it might say download the pre-configuration called STP initial. So I would select that, I would click the Load Config button, and then I would sit back and I would wait 5 or 6 minutes. And during that time, there's a script running in the background that's logging into each one of these devices, wiping their current configurations clean, and downloading a pre-configuration for you. So for example, if I go back to this, if I download the pre-configuration called ICND1 WB Routing 1, it's going to build this configuration for me. I'm not going to have to necessarily type in all these IP addresses. I'm not going to have to bring up these interfaces. So once that configuration template is done, it'll be preset and ready to go for me. So that's another benefit of renting time on our racks, is you have access to these configuration templates you can use. And now as you're going through the workbook, you'll say, here's your tasks. So your tasks are your objective. You know, do this, make this router do this. And then you try to do it. And then once you've got it working, or if you get stuck, you click on where it says configuration. And it says, okay, you know, here's the commands you should have typed in on each of the devices. And when you issue a show command, it'll highlight, you know, this is specifically what you're looking for. Your equipment should look like this. And so this is an example of some of our workbooks. So our workbooks are really nice because, like I said, it's got objectives already pre-built in there. It's got output to verify if what you've done is correct. And these are great. So I said there were 3 ways of doing labs: buying your own equipment, renting time on someone's racks, like ours. The third method, and I already alluded to this briefly before, is getting some software on your laptop or PC that emulates or simulates routers and switches, and doing all right there on your laptop or PC. Now, there's some benefits to that. There's 3 sort of really popular things that do that. And those 3 things are GNS3 and, let me write this on here. So GNS3 and Packet Tracer. Forgive my handwriting, but hopefully you guys can read this well enough. Packet Tracer and Viral. So let me talk quickly about all 3 of these things. So GNS3, to start with, it's probably my favorite of these 3. GNS3 is a network emulator. What do I mean by that? So with GNS3, you already have to have some Cisco iOS software that you downloaded. So this is assuming that you're like a Cisco client already. You're already purchased something from Cisco and you have the legitimate rights to download software from their website. There are other ways to also get Cisco iOS software, but I'm not going to dive into that. I'll just let you use your imagination. But the idea is with GNS3, you have to have some Cisco router software already on your laptop. Now, router software normally goes in a router, right? You got to load it in a router. With GNS3 is an emulator. In other words, you start up GNS3, you say, hey, GNS3, here's the software I want you to use. I want you to use this Cisco iOS router software right here. And then GNS3 sort of emulates the chassis or the body of the router. So the software is running, it's running in your laptop, but the software thinks it's running in a real router. It doesn't know any difference. So that's one of the things I really love about GNS3 is that you're actually using real Cisco iOS software. All the commands you would have on a normal router are there. All the debugging and show commands are there. Another great thing I like about GNS3 is it's completely offline. In other words, you don't need internet connectivity for it. You can take your laptop with you to the coffee shop, to the library. Hey, you can sit out on the beach where there's no internet connectivity whatsoever, and you can do your GNS3 labs. It's all on your laptop itself. Now, if you want a little bit more information about GNS3, I already pointed out in a previous video the series of videos I did on that. And of course, they also have their own website, gns3.com. Their software is free. It's a free download, so just download it to your laptop. The only tough part is getting the actual Cisco iOS image that loads into that. But I would recommend that. That's a great software to use. Now, there are some limitations to GNS3. For example, it doesn't use every version of Cisco router. There's only like 5 or 6 flavors of Cisco routers that you can use in GNS3. For the purposes of the CCNA, that is irrelevant. For the CCNA level, you don't have to know the specifics of a particular model or platform or what particular commands are only supported here but not supported here. You don't have to know that for the CCNA. So pretty much any of the Cisco routers that are supported in GNS3 will be perfectly fine for you when you're working with it. But that is somewhat of a downside. The other downside, and unfortunately this is pretty major, is switching. Switching is very limited in GNS3. As a matter of fact, you can't download switching software. It doesn't support that, like the real software you put in a switch. You have to download software for a router and then basically like emulate a switching module inside that router. There's certain routers that come with empty slots, and you can put in that slot a module that's like a little switch. So it's a switch inside of a router. And the downside to that is that can give you a little bit of exposure to switching. But for example, with spanning tree, the commands are a little bit different. The output that you'll see is different than if you were on a real switch. There's some features like port security. Port security is a big part of the CCNA, but you can't do port security in GNS3. The switching things that you create don't support it. So for routing, it's awesome. You can even go all the way up to the CCIE level routing stuff with GNS3. With switching, not so much. The other thing about it is that because it is running in your laptop, it's very resource intensive. In other words, it's going to use a lot of your CPU, a lot of your memory. You don't want to be running other stuff when you're running GNS3. You want to close down all your browsers, all your email, and your topologies will be kind of limited. But once again, for the CCNA level, you don't need to create a topology of 15 routers and 5 switches. That's way overkill. Most of the CCNA stuff you'll need to do will be fine with just 3 or 4 routers and a couple of switches, and that's it. And GNS3 is perfect for that. Now let's move on to the next one I want to talk about, which was Packet Tracer. I'll go here. Now Packet Tracer, Cisco Packet Tracer. That is also completely free. First of all, you have to register for Cisco's Network Academy, but you don't have to go. You don't have to attend it. You just enroll in Networking Academy, and then you'll be able to download Packet Tracer. Now, what's different from Packet Tracer and GNS3? Some of the similarities are both of them are offline. So once you've got the software, you don't need an internet connection. Sit on the beach, sit in the forest, sit on top of the skyscraper, wherever you want, and you can do your labs. Now, a nice thing about Packet Tracer is it's fully self-contained. In other words, with GNS3, you also had to find some Cisco iOS software to have GNS3 work with it. That's not the case with Packet Tracer. You see, GNS3 was an emulator. It worked with real Cisco software to emulate the body of a router or a switch. Packet Tracer is a simulator. Totally different beast. Packet Tracer does not use real Cisco software. Packet Tracer is its own software that was built from the ground up to look and feel like Cisco iOS. Now, once again, there's pros and cons to that. The con to that is that there are certain Cisco iOS commands that are not in Packet Tracer. It's like when you're doing your simulations on the CCNA. Not all of the show commands are there. Debugging commands a lot of times aren't there. Some of the more advanced features you want to do at the CCNP and CCIE level are not there. Those are some of the downsides, but there's a lot of pros. For the CCNA, I think Packet Tracer is everything you need. You can do more switching stuff in Packet Tracer than you can with GNS3. Now, once again, this is CCNA level I'm talking about right here. Port security that I said you couldn't do in GNS3, you can do that in Packet Tracer. Spanning tree and configuring it and viewing it as if it was a real switch, you can do that in Packet Tracer. Can't really do that in GNS3. Memory and CPU consumption, a lot less in Packet Tracer. GNS3, a lot more. So Either one of them will work for CCNA, but probably Packet Tracer is a little bit better because it's got all the switching stuff you'll need as well as the routing stuff. Third option is Cisco's Viral, the Virtual Internet Routing Lab. Let's take a look at that for a moment. Now, the Cisco Viral shares a lot of the same commonality as GNS3 in that, like GNS3, it uses real Cisco software for the routers. Like GNS3, it emulates them. It's not a simulator. You can have a limited degree of switching in there, like GNS3. Here's the pros and the cons. Cisco Viral requires you to have an internet connection. It won't work without it. So if you want to do your labs on the beach, if you want to do your labs somewhere where there's not a Wi-Fi connection, can't do that with Cisco Viral. Second downside, it's not free. Okay, you do have to pay for it. I think it starts out at like $200 a year and then goes on up from there. So you do have to pay something for that. That's the second downside. On the positive side, because Cisco's Viral is not really running on your laptop, I mean, part of it is, but the main bulk of it is running on a remote server, you can build much larger topologies. Now, like I said, for the CCNA student, that's kind of irrelevant. Now, once you get to the CCNP and certainly in the CCIE level, yeah, you need to start building those bigger topologies, especially with routing and stuff, to see how everything works. But the main benefit of Viral is really more towards CCIE level, and maybe to some extent the CCNP level, but really for CCIE level where people have to build really large-scale topologies. But another benefit of it, in addition to supporting large-scale topologies and that it doesn't use a lot of resources on your laptop, is that, you know, with GNS3, you have to have a real Cisco iOS image. Well, what if you're not a Cisco customer? What if you don't have any legal, legitimate access to a Cisco iOS image and you don't really want to steal it because you don't want Cisco's lawyers breathing down your back? That's where Viral is beneficial. Right? If you pay the $200 for Viral to have that for a year, it comes with the Cisco iOS images that you need. You don't have to steal it. So you don't have to be a Cisco customer. You don't need to have purchased a router or a switch to have access to Cisco's Viral. So those are some of the pros and the cons. And also, one from a CCNA perspective, one significant con I find is that Viral is really complex. To set it up, to get it working, is not easy. GNS3 and Packet Tracer, just a few clicks of a mouse button and install it, it's done. Viral, not so much. It's really hard to work with. So if you get to the CCIE level, yeah, you'll probably want to invest in Viral and get to learn how it works. But for the CCNA and even for the CCNP level, I don't think it's necessary. So that is frequent lab practice. And you'll want to do your labs over and over and over again. And once again, I would suggest that you not only create your own labs, but you use other people's written labs as well, like workbooks and things like that, and just do labs over and over and over again. And going back to the old topics, right? Build your labs, make them progressively more complex. So, you know, add spanning tree into your routing lab, add port security into your spanning tree lab, start adding more and more features to those labs so they get bigger and more complex. And that's your way of continually refreshing your mind on some of those older topics. And the last thing I want to talk about as far as study tips is concerned is get familiar with Wireshark. What is Wireshark, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked me that question. So Wireshark is also another free piece of software you can get. So you can go to wireshark.org and you can download Wireshark. Now, what is it exactly? So your laptop, your PC, has some kind of a network connection. Could be a Wi-Fi network connection, could be a wired Ethernet connection. Either way, your laptop, especially if you're sitting in a corporate office or a company, is seeing a lot of information is coming in and your laptop is seeing it that's not even meant for you. It's meant for other people, other stuff. Wireshark is a program you can turn on where you can tell your laptop, hey, display for me in a graphical format everything you see. Every piece of data that's coming in or going out on the network, I want to see it visually. And this is really useful. For example, I believe I have Wireshark on this laptop. Let me bring it up here. There we go. No, I don't want to install an update. Here we go. So when you first start up Wireshark, after you've downloaded it for free, you want to select the network adapter that you want to look at. Now you can see in my particular case, these squiggly lines right here indicate that my Wi-Fi adapter is really the one that's active, right? The other adapters are flat lines, so they're not sending or receiving anything. So I'm going to click on my Wi-Fi, and up here I'm going to start it. And I'm just going to let collect, okay, that's it, just a couple of seconds. So you can see in just a couple of seconds, look at all this stuff I've collected. Well, in addition to the wow factor of that, this is actually very useful for a learning tool. For example, let's see here, what would be like a TC, like at the CCNA level, you have to learn about something called the Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP. So I can see here, this is a TCP segment that I received, and you can open it up, you can say, oh, okay, I learned about Ethernet. Oh, here's the various things inside the Ethernet header. I can actually see it. Oh, here's the various things inside the IP header. I learned about the version field. There it is. I learned about the time to live. Oh, there's a time to live. So you can actually visually see the things you've been learning about. Oh, the transmission control protocol. I can see here, oh, source port 443. Yeah, that's HTTPS. That's secure HTTP. I can see my sequence number and my acknowledgement number. So Wireshark is a great tool for visually seeing these protocols that you just read about. The stuff that is going on in the background of your laptop, well, I know my laptop is doing web browsing. You ever actually seen it? You ever actually seen what those web browsing packets look like and all the fields in there? You ever seen what happens when your laptop is telnetting to something and what that looks like and what the transactions that goes back and forth? Wireshark can show that to you. So it's a fantastic learning tool. And if you do end up going the route of purchasing your own home lab, like routers and switches, is even better, because now you can connect, you can have Wireshark sniff the stuff that's going back and forth between those routers and switches. You can see the routing protocol packets. You can see the spanning tree information. So Wireshark is a great tool to reinforce that learning. So I believe that is all I have on that topic. Let's go to the Q&A here and see if there are any unanswered questions. So there's a question here on when it comes to our I&E racks for the CCIE, our I&E CCIE racks. Are the labs already pre-built, or do you have to build it based on the topology selected? So for our I&E CCIE level racks, it uses real physical switches, but it uses virtualized routers. It's kind of like Viral. It's using real router software like Viral does, but it's a virtualized topology. So when you start up your rack, those virtual routers will already start up. They will already be pre-configured to be connecting to each other with certain virtual cables and stuff, so you can't change that. In other words, if you said, well, I like the CCIE topology here, but it's showing me that router 1's connected to router 2. I don't want that. I want router 1 to connect to router 4. That's impossible. You have to use it based on the topology that it's pre-designed to have. How many lab topologies are available for the routing and switching, the CCIRS exam? I think we have a couple. I think we have like one or two, but once again, to answer that, I would recommend that you go to, because you can see this without having paid for anything, you can go to the members dashboard, click on rack rentals. This is all free. And this shows you the various topologies we have. So for example, for routing and switching, we have a routing and switching V5 topology. We have a full scale topology. You can see it's more expensive, but that's because it's a larger topology. So for routing, and then we have a routing and switching troubleshooting topology, which is also fairly large. If you just click on the rack rental guide for any one of these, you should be able to see somewhere in here the topology diagram. So for example, here it shows you the diagram for the WAN connections. Here it shows you the diagram for the LAN connections. But all that should be visible within the rack rental section of your members dashboard. All right, I have another question coming in from Jagdeep. I'll wait for you to write your question, and while that's coming up, let's see here. Somebody else also mentions something called Eve, Eve Next Generation. So that's also something you can use for simulating routers and switches and doing your labs. Also, while I'm here talking about this, for those of you who are at the CCNP level, or within very shortly will be at the CCNP level, we have a new product out that I want to point your attention to. Something I'm very proud of. I built this for you guys. For a long time, when it came to workbooks, we had a CCNP switch and a CCNP route workbook. And just yesterday, we finally came out with a CCNP T-shoot workbook, because the CCNP is 3 exams: route, switch, and T-shoot. And I'm very proud of this. In this workbook, you've got 20 tickets, and when you click on a ticket, I've designed it to be as closely replicate the CCNP T-shoot exam as possible. So this topology almost exactly replicates the topology you'll see in the T-shoot exam. It uses the exact same networks and subnets. So once you've done these tickets, you'll already be well versed on what networks are in the topology, where they are. And just like the T-shoot exam, you load an initial configuration, which preloads the routers and switches. It pre-configures them with problems and issues, and then you have to troubleshoot it. And just like the T-shoot exam is 3 sections. On any given ticket, on one ticket you'll be asked, what part of the topology did you find the problem? So just like here, you have to select that. And then you expand this to see if you got the right answer. And then the second part of your question will be, what protocol or technology was the problem related to? So here, you'll have to select that. And then lastly, now in the T-shoot exam, the third part of your ticket is a multiple choice question that says, which of the commands below would you have typed to fix the problem? So when you get to the CCNP level and you take the T-shoot exam, you're basically just identifying where the problem is, the nature of the problem, and what command you would type to fix it, but you don't actually fix the problem. Here in these, you will be. So in the third section, I actually want you to fix the problem. And then if you expand it, it talks about, okay, here's how you went about fixing it, here's the commands you typed, and then you go on to the next ticket. And this is a mixture of routing and switching tickets, IPv4 and IPv6. So I'm very proud of this. I'm very happy that we have this out now, which fully rounds out our CCNP curriculum. Let's see. Somebody's asking, is it possible to communicate between 2 different VLANs without IVR? Well, without inter-VLAN routing, is what the person was talking about. Yes, you could bridge between the two VLANs. You could have two VLANs connected to two interfaces on a router. Instead of those two interfaces routing, you configure those interfaces on the router to bridge. But in that particular case, why would you have two VLANs in the first place? The whole point is to keep the two VLANs separate from each other, but that is one way around that. Somebody's asking, how many tokens are an average recommended to buy for the CCIE routing and switching? Yeah, you would probably want to do more than 100 tokens for that. Let me go back to this. Rack rentals. Purchase tokens. 100, 250, 250. It also depends on which rack you're going to work on. 100, 250, 500. Now, if we go back to the racks here, if you're going to use the V5 rack, that's 5 tokens an hour. So if you got 500 tokens, that'd give you 100 hours. You'd probably want to get at least 500 tokens. 500 tokens would give you 100 hours on that rack, right? 100 hours times, yeah. So that'd be a good starting point. I don't know if that would be enough to complete everything. Probably not, but I would start out with that. Let's see if there's any other questions we've got online here. Somebody asked, when it comes to the rack rentals, is it Telnet only or can you SSH? Our current rack rentals are only set up for Telnet. They do not support SSH, so you have to Telnet into them. Okay, so it looks like many of the other questions that were previously asked were already answered by you guys, so that's great. So now let's go ahead and move into the next section. The next section is what I call my own personal observations. This will be fast, but this is like, you know, I take the CCNA, I try to take it at least once a year just to refresh myself on, you know, what topics are the heavy hitters, you know, what do I see a lot? Is the level of depth I'm seeing on topics really corresponding to the books that I'm reading? Just, you know, so I can give you the most recent information. So this is what this is. From the last time I took it, which is a few months ago, what are my personal observations? Now, I will give you a caveat here. I don't go out and take all 3 exams once a year. I just don't do that. So I typically go out and take the composite exam about once a year to keep up to date on that. So these personal observations are from that. All right, so number 1, the CCNA composite exam tells you that when you read it on the web page, it says you'll get somewhere between 60 and 70 questions. The other ones say 45 to 55. So I actually got 64 questions when I took it the last time, just to give you an example. So I had 90 minutes to do 64 questions. As far as scoring is concerned, a perfect score is 1,000 points. Okay? A passing score is 810. So you have to get a minimum of 810 out of 1,000 to pass. Now, a lot of people ask questions about scoring. For example, a common question I hear is, if there's a multiple choice question that has 3 correct answers and you only get 2 of them correct, do you get any points for that, or do you get no points? If I'm doing a simulation and I get most of it right, but I don't get it all right, is it all or nothing? Nobody knows the answer to that. Now, you will hear people say, oh yeah, you get partial credit, or oh no, you don't get any credit at all. I don't know how they can say that, and here's why I say that. Prior to working here, I worked at Cisco Systems. I worked there for about 17 years before I came here to INE. And I worked very close. I worked in the training department. I helped train Cisco's internal TAC engineers, the people that you call up to take technical cases. And I worked very closely with the department that actually made these exams and made these tests. As a matter of fact, I authored some of the multicast questions on the CCIE exam. I don't know if they're still in there now, but I did that. And why do I say this? I say this because even internal Cisco employees can't answer questions about grading. They don't know. Even when I worked at Cisco, try as I might, because I taught internal Cisco engineers and they would ask those same questions and I wanted the answers. I wanted to help them. I could not get that information. Unless you are working inside Cisco in that select group of people that actually makes the tests and makes the testing engine, even the people who create the questions themselves, because I did some of that, they don't know how the questions are scored. Only the people who actually create the exam engine, that GUI, that software, have the answer to that. And they aren't talking. They're not even talking to the other Cisco employees who work there. So certainly they're not going to give that information to people who don't work at Cisco. So if anybody ever tries to tell you, oh yeah, you'll get partial credit, I would say, really? And who do you know at Cisco who told you that? Because that, I think, is a myth. That's just like top secret level clearance information. You don't know. Nobody knows how they do the scoring on that. I wish I could help you. Simulations. The last time I took the CCNA composite exam, I got one. I got one simulation, and that was it. And that simulation was based on access lists. I will tell you that. So be prepared to know access lists. They will want you to configure access lists. As far as the testlet, remember the testlet was that one type of thing which it gave you a topology and they wanted you to identify a problem. You click on it, you tried to identify a problem with show commands, and then you selected a multiple choice answer saying this is the issue, but you didn't actually configure anything. You didn't fix anything. It was just testing your knowledge of show commands, of verification commands. I got one of those, and that one was on EIGRP. Okay. Now this last thing in this section I want to emphasize, brain dump in your car. What's that referring to? So I mentioned that there's a very good likelihood that when you take the ICND-1 or the ICND-2 or the composite exam for the first time, you'll probably fail. Most people do. Well, you want to strategize. You want to use that. Here's what you want to do. While you are taking the exam, if you run across a question that you just flat out don't know, or maybe it's one of those questions that's poorly worded and you say, well, it could be that or this. I'm not sure what they're looking for here. On that laminated sheet that you've got in front of you, write something down to help you remember that question. Like write down frame relay DELC, which one is used for LMI? Maybe you got a question on that and you didn't know. Spanning tree max age timer. You didn't remember what that was. So by the time you're done taking the exam, on that laminated sheet of paper, you will have created like several bullet point items about the questions that you saw that you struggled with. Now, hit your submit the test. Now, assuming that you failed, sit there and stare at that for a second. Stare at those bullet points. Try to memorize it to the best of your ability. Then, as you walk out of the exam testing center and you walk back to your car, or you walk back to the bus, or you walk back to your bicycle, however you got there, before you go anywhere, you want to sit down and you want to do a brain dump in your car. What does that look like? Like for me, when I sit down there, I leave my tablet, my iPad in my car, and then when I'm done with the exam, I sit down and I start recording my audio on here. I'll hold my tablet in front of myself and say, okay, there was a question on frame relay DELCs and LMI. I didn't know which one that was. There was a question on the OSPF dead interval and how many seconds that was. I got that one wrong. There was another question there on access list and what port number was used for SSH. I got that one wrong. And so I'll record this to myself, or do it on your smartphone. Just bring something with you to the testing center, leave it in your car that you can record on. And then eventually you'll reach a point where you say, okay, that's it. I can't remember any other questions I struggled with. That covers them all. And then you stop the recording. Very important that you do this before you leave that parking lot, because your mind will be totally fresh. If you wait until you get home, 15, 20, 30 minutes, or heavens forbid, you wait till the end of the workday, you will forget a lot of that very critical stuff. Those questions you struggled with, they'll go on, they'll evaporate from your brain. That's why you want to capture that right then and there in that moment. And then, when you have the next opportunity, play that recording back to yourself and start typing it out in Notepad or WordPad or something. Tidy up a little bit, and guess what? Now you've created a nice study guide for yourself on what you need to focus on the next time you take the test. Now you've got a clear thing of the topics and the issues that you struggled with, so you can really concentrate and focus on those. That's what I mean by brain dump in your car. Highly recommend you do that. Okay, let's do another Q&A, see if just in those last few moments any other questions have popped up. Oh, Android gameplay for all. You've encouraged me to come from a non-tech background to the tech background. Fantastic. Glad to hear it. I'm sure you'll be successful. Just keep at it. Are we having a CCNP kickoff session soon? I suppose we could do that. Don't have anything like that planned right now, but we could do that. What version is the course? You mean what version is this that I'm doing right now? Like I said, we do this every single month. A lot of what I'm talking about today is the same stuff I talked about back in September and August, but it's always a little bit different. I always have different ideas and different examples I want to give, but it's basically the same thing. What are the major reasons for packet drops and how to avoid that? Wow, there's a big question for you. So packet drops could be a lot of things. Probably the most common reason for packet drops is congestion on a network. In other words, a situation where you have like a whole bunch of interfaces feeding into, let's say, a switch. You've got, a switch that's connected to 50 cubes, 50 training offices in a building. Tons of information are coming in from people sitting in those cubes, sitting in those offices, and it's all trying to go out one egress or one transmit port. Well, if that one egress port or transmit port doesn't have enough bandwidth to hold all that combined traffic, that's what we call congestion. And so we'll have no choice but to start dropping packets or frames because it runs out of memory to store them. So that's the most common reason for packet drops, is congestion somewhere in a network. And the CCNA, I think the question was, so the CCNA is currently on version 3. The CCNA was updated just last year, 2016. And typically, Cisco updates their exams about every 3 or 4 years. So since it was just updated, I think in July of 2016, you've got at least another 2 years to go before they update it again. So all you guys who are watching me right now should not have to worry about that. And even when Cisco does update an exam, it's not like you're preparing for an exam and all of a sudden one day, boop, it's gone, you can't do it anymore. They don't do that. They always give you a window of time. So for example, if there was, the CCNP. The CCNP is due for an update. The last time they updated the 3 CCNP exams was 2014. And here we are coming on the end of 2017. So because it's every 3 or 4 years, I expect probably in the next few months us to hear that the CCNP is being updated. Now when that happens, whether it be the IE, the NA, or the NP, what they do is Cisco will make an announcement. They'll say, okay, starting on this date, the new exam will be available. And then there's going to be a window of time where there's an overlap. They'll say on this date, you can start taking the new exam, and from this date until usually it's at least a good 3 or 4 months, but in that 3-4 month window, you can continue taking the old exam if that's what you've been studying for, or you can take the new exam, and then when that window closes, from that point on, the old exam is permanently gone, and you can only take the new exam. Okay, but they do give you a window of time after they make the announcement when you can still get in the old exam if that's what you've been studying for. Somebody asked for the CCNP, do you actually have to work in the networking industry, or can you just take it, can you pass the exam by just grinding books and labs? You don't have to work in the networking industry for any of this stuff. To pass these exams, you don't have to, right? Technically, even the CCIE, believe it or not, just by grinding through labs, looking at sniffer traces, reading and memorizing a lot of books, you could pass all these certifications. You could. So that's the short answer to your question. Michael, I feel your pain. So Michael says the CCNA course I had taken, all 4 classes from a community college, and they used the old curriculum for the old test version, not the latest one. That is very sad. I'm sorry to hear that because the CCNA was updated about 1.5 years ago. By now, they should have been using the new curriculum. So, but here is the good thing. When the new CCNA came out, what they call the CCNA version 3, which came out last year, it wasn't all changed. In other words, if you had been studying for the old CCNA, 85 or 90% of that is still applicable to the new CCNA. All right, so it's not like you completely wasted your time. There are some new topics. For example, BGP was added to it. Some other stuff that you would need to know, but a lot of the stuff you studied is still relevant. There wasn't a whole lot that they removed from the CCNA. They added stuff, but they didn't take away very much. So that's the good news. Somebody asks, is Python related to networking? So Python, as far as networking goes, one of the most common uses of Python is to script things. For example, I wish I knew Python. I do, because it would be so useful to me. For example, a lot of times when I'm doing labs, I'll find myself doing the same commands over and over and over again. For example, I have like 6 or 7 commands I will repeatedly do to reset my equipment, load a configuration on it, and get it ready. Well, Python is a language that if I knew it, I could create a script, and with just a click of a button or typing in a single command, it could automatically log into everything for me. It could automatically type in all the commands for me, and just, it's great for automating things. So when it comes to networking, that's the main usage of Python, is when you have a lot of stuff that you do repetitively via the command line that you'd like to automate. So Python is very useful in that regard. Okay. And someone wants me to please, this will be the last question I'll answer, and then we'll go into the last section here. Somebody wants me to elaborate a little bit on software-defined networking, or SDN. So I'll tell you what the hope is for SDN in the future. We're not there yet. And I'll talk just briefly about what SDN is primarily used for right now. So when this concept of software-defined networking first came out, here was the vision, the dream. The idea was for decades, a network administrator or network engineer needed to log on to each switch, each router, one at a time, to configure them with commands, to issue commands to monitor it, to make sure it was healthy and working. And if they wanted to change the operational characteristic of that device, they had to log into that and do it. Now, there was SNMP, right? There was SNMP out there which to a limited degree could push commands to a router or switch and could obtain statistics and information from that router switch and display it in a nice graphical format. But a lot of stuff still had to be done by logging onto individual routers and switches one at a time. Then somebody had this idea. They said, wouldn't it be nice if we change the software running in those routers and switches in such a way that someone could log into a server, right? Sit down in front of a server, log into a server, and then from that server, they could push commands to all the routers and switches. They could get information from all the routers and switches. Now you might be thinking, wait a second, that just sounds like SNMP. But they took it a step further. They said, what if somebody had some software application? Here's where software-defined networking comes in. Somebody had some software running in this part of the network and this part of the network. And before the software started up, the software would talk to that server. The software would say, I'm about to start up. I'm about to start sending information from point A to point B. Please change the network for me. Log into the routers and switches and optimize this path for me. Make sure that when I start up, that my data goes across a predefined path that's optimized, that won't delay packets, that won't drop packets, that's made just for me. In other words, we want the software to define how the network operates. You see, normally when a packet enters a network, I'll say the network, we're really talking about like a router or a switch, but the network will look into a table and simply say, what's the next hop to send this packet on its way? Let me look at the destination of this packet and figure out what the next hop switch or the next hop router is to get it on its way. That device, that router or switch that packet entered, doesn't have a full view of the network. It doesn't know if by sending it down that path, that packet is ultimately going to experience congestion or loss, or if that is the best path given what's inside that packet. Maybe that path would be okay if that packet was data, but that path isn't that great if it's voice. Operating on an independent basis, independent routers and switches can't make that decision. Software-defined networking says, hey, this server is going to know what the entire network looks like because it's communicating with these routers and switches. It's gathering statistics. It knows what the routers and what this network looks like. And the server can actually program the tables of the routers and switches. And we're not just talking about sending a configuration command saying, turn on OSPF or turn on spanning tree. We're actually talking about the server saying, hey, I want you to go into your table, and if you see this kind of information, make sure you send it this way, or you send it this way, or you do this special thing to it. So in essence, software-defined networking means that the software running in your network, like the software running on your servers and your laptops and stuff, is dictating what the network is doing. It's dictating the forwarding paths and how the network treats that data. Now, that's the ideal world. That's what software-defined networking is hopefully moving towards. Right now, it's not there yet. Right now, software-defined networking primarily is just glorified SNMP. Right now, most people that give you an SDN solution, it's really just, let's push these commands to the routers and switches, these iOS commands. Let's gather statistics back so I can see how heavy my CPU is running, how many routes I have. So it's not yet at the point where the server can dictate what the network looks like and how it actually forwards traffic. But that's the ideal. That's where it's moving towards. All right, so that's my little overview there of SDN. So the last thing I want to talk about, we have one more section here, is some common pitfalls. In other words, what are some things that sometimes happen when people are studying that just derails them? It causes them to ultimately not even take their CCNA certification. And how do you avoid that? So number one, failing to create or adhere to a dedicated schedule. Now, if you're sitting and you're saying to yourself, okay, well, every day I'm going to devote an hour and a half to studying my CCNA. I'm going to do it every single day. Okay, but that's as far as you get. Today starts up. Say, okay, today at like probably 3 o'clock, my calendar seems empty, I'll study then. By the time 3 o'clock rolls around, either you will have forgotten about that because you'll be so overloaded with other projects and tasks, or that time will be utilized with something else. Somebody else will put a project or a task, or you'll be working on something and saying, oh, I really need to finish this before I study for my CCNA. I'll do it afterwards. If you don't put it as part of your calendar, if you don't say every single day, Monday through Friday from 3 to 5, I'm going to study my CCNA. And on Saturday and Sunday from 9 to 12, even if my buddies want to take me to the pancake place, I'm going to say, no, I am studying my CCNA. I cannot come. You have to make it dedicated, and you have to adhere to that. Because otherwise, all kinds of things will try to get in the way, and all of a sudden you'll look back and you'll say, what happened the last 2 months? I think I studied like 3 hours in the last 2 months. Make a schedule, stick with it. Number two, becoming overwhelmed. This is easy. I mean, if you take a look at this official certification book just for the ICND1, it's like that thick. It's really big, by the way. Becoming overwhelmed. There, you can see the slide now. So it's really easy to look at a book of that size and say, how am I going to memorize this? My brain isn't that big. I can't shove that in there. Okay, you know, it's sort of like the old saying, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. Same type of thing here. This is a case of where you don't want to see the forest through the trees. You want to look at the individual trees. In other words, as you're studying, don't think about all the stuff you have yet to learn, all the stuff you don't know yet. Just take it one step at a time. Just say, this week, I'm going to study chapter 1. I'm going to create flashcards on chapter 1. I'm going to read video. I'm going to watch videos based on the topics in chapter 1. And I'm not going to think about chapter 2 until I'm done with chapter 1 and I've gone through all my flashcards, I've answered them all correctly, then I'm going to move on to chapter 2. And while you start reading chapter 2 next week, go back to those flashcards periodically and just keep moving ahead. Don't think about everything that's in front of you. Focus on what you've done already. Be proud of what you have memorized. And just concentrate on what you're learning today, not what you have left to learn tomorrow. Another common pitfall, not learning IP addressing and subnetting well. I emphasized this earlier and I'm going to emphasize it again. There are no calculators allowed when you take your CCNA exam. So don't walk in there thinking, oh, I don't have to worry about binary. I got a calculator to do that. No, you don't. And remember, when that 90-minute timer starts, you are going to be stressed, right? You don't know what questions you're going to be presented. You don't know what simulations you're going to get. And so you don't want to waste precious time. For example, let's say you got a question and it gave you something like this. 1.32.101.99, and it said 255, 224.0. And the question was, identify the network that this host resides in. You should be able to answer that question in 30 seconds or less. If you're stuck saying, okay, 255, that's 128 plus 64 plus 96. If you're adding up all the binary, that's not a good thing. So you want to go into the CCNA feeling very, very comfortable and confident with your IP addressing and subnetting skills. Otherwise, that's going to burn up a ton of your time. So that's another common pitfall. And then, so the last thing I have on here is neglecting the trivial points. What do I mean by that? A lot of people, when they're going through the topics, for example, a routing protocol, let's say EIGRP, you might read something that says, okay, EIGRP sends out hello packets every 5 seconds, and the dead interval or the hold time is roughly 15 seconds. Now you might be tempted to think, okay, that's interesting. Move on. No. When a book or video gives you a number, like a timer, or the number of a port number, or a protocol number, you want to memorize that stuff. That is prime stuff to put on your flashcards, because you will be tested on that. You will be given questions on access lists saying, create an access list that denies SSH. And if you don't know what the port number is for SSH, you won't be able to answer that question. You won't be able to do the simulation. You'll be given questions on what is the IP protocol number for OSPF. If you neglected that, you're going to get it wrong. Guaranteed, you will get questions. Cisco loves giving questions on those nitty-gritty little details involving numbers that you have to memorize. If you neglect those things and you consider them to be trivial, you will fail. So those were probably the 4 biggest pitfalls I could think of for this section. All right, so we got one more section for Q&A, and then I am finished. So let's see if there's any other questions here that I can answer. The link to the troubleshooting labs. Yeah, so that is, I believe you'll have to have an all-access pass to get to those troubleshooting labs. But that, when you log into your members account, it would be here under workbooks. So if you click on workbooks, if you have an all-access pass, you should see at the top of the list here the CCNP T-Shoot workbook. If you don't see that, then I would recommend calling someone in sales and either talking to them about an all-access pass, or possibly you can buy this as a standalone workbook. I don't know, but that's where you will find it. So someone else is saying that they took the CCNA 2 years ago, passed the first time. That's fantastic, great. Scared of the CCNP. What should I pursue? Like I mentioned, my recommendation is go for the CCNP in routing and switching. I strongly recommend that you get a really good foundational knowledge of routing and switching, and the CCNA alone is not going to be enough for that. So I would recommend doing the CCNP. Now, as far as the CCNP is concerned, it's 3 exams: switch, route, and T-shoot. I always recommend that people knock out the switch exam first, simply from the perspective of, if you actually look at the blueprints, the switch blueprint is about 1/3 the size of the route blueprint. There's so many more bullet points in route than there is in switch. So I think it'd just be easier to knock off switch first, then go with route, and then T-shoot will be the last thing. Okay? In T-shoot, there's nothing new to learn. There's no new topics or features or protocols to learn. Once you've gone through route and switch, you should have learned not only how to configure stuff, but how to troubleshoot stuff. You should know what show command to issue to detect if something's wrong. So T-shoot is just testing your knowledge of, do you know how to troubleshoot the things that you learned in switch and route? So that would be my recommendation. Somebody's asking, can you please share how to learn CFM and the best video? I'm sorry, I have to admit, in this context, I don't know what CFM stands for. So maybe if you can expand on that acronym, I might be able to help you. The CCNP is no longer 4 sections. It used to be. The CCNP back before 2014 was actually 4 exams. but when they updated it in 2014, it became 3 exams. So it's just switch, route, and T-shoot. So a lot of the stuff that used to be on the CCNP, like quality of service, like multicasting, is no longer on it. Okay. One other thing I want to point out before I let you guys go, this is just a nice little perk that we're doing right now, is if you go to INE's homepage, ine.com, you'll see at the very top it says win a free Razer gaming bundle. If you click on that, right now INE has a promotion going on where if you are an INE customer, every customer automatically gets entered into this drawing to win this this Razer gaming bundle, which comes with a great set of headphones, a gaming laptop, this backpack here. So I just want to make you guys aware of that. That's just for the month of October. As you can see, if you actually buy some stuff, you get even more entries into this contest. So one lucky person is going to win all this good stuff. Okay, I think that pretty much concludes everything. I don't see any unanswered questions. There's a lot of questions in here, but just scrolling through it, it looks like you guys have done a great job answering each other's questions. So based on that, we are done for today. So I hope today was an enjoyable experience for you. I hope that it has motivated you to start pursuing and studying for your CCNA. Like I mentioned, I'm always here for you. You saw earlier my contact information. And also I talked about the INE online community for posting questions. But I hope this opened your eyes to some things that maybe you didn't know before. And I just hope it's valuable. So based on that, I'm going to wish you all good luck. Please let me know how you're doing. And hopefully, some of you guys will sign up for my CCNP or my CCNA boot camp coming up in a few weeks. So I will see you guys all in my next presentation. Have a good night.